Okay. Where did you come from? So for the legislative council or something like that?
We're supposed to smile a lot. Because that was one of the things
exciting.
they said.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they said that at the.
I like this.
That's interesting.
You saying you don't like those city commission meetings?
Especially
Like,
when you come with higher
So we're not gonna.
You're coming with
bad video, you know, and
entirely
dim
different
lighting.
ends of the spectrum, right?
So I'll yell yo every once in a while and
But the good news is
Just
that
have
you
to
know.
enjoy this.
do a little happy dance when we pass the borders.
Just like that. Yep. Yep. Don't be shy. I just didn't want to scare you. I'll stand up. Okay.
All right, I think we'll get started. And good morning to everybody, and thank you for joining us today. We're going to call the meeting to order, and I think we'll believe we will start with a roll call from Christy.
Board Chair Diedrich,
Here.
Dr. Jelmstead,
Here.
Mr. Dr. Meliker,
Here.
Mr. Schaff,
Shaft is here.
Ms. Nesset. Here. Mr. Morton,
Here.
Dr. Murphy,
Here.
Mr. McEwen,
Here.
Ms. Reichert,
Here.
Ms. Hofford. Here.
Okay, thank you. And may I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Mr. Schaff,
Schaff votes yes.
Ms. Nesset,
Yes.
Mr. McEwen,
Yeah.
Mr. Morton,
Yes.
Dr. Johnstead,
Yes.
Ms. Reichert,
Yes.
Dr. Malacher,
Yes.
Board Chair Deidre.
Yes. Second item on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes from June 26th, July 30th, and April 28th. Motion to approve.
So move.
Second?
Second.
Thank you.
Dr. Johnstead,
Yes.
Mr. McEwen,
Yes.
Ms. Reichert,
Yes.
Ms. Nesset,
Yes.
Dr. Malacher,
Yes.
Mr. Morton,
Yes.
Mr. Schaff,
Schaff votes yes.
Board Chair Deidre.
Yes. Moving on to the reports and public comment. Item number 3 is the board chair's report. And I want to say that this is a very exciting day for higher education in North Dakota. Today, we are going to review the board's 2015-2020 strategic plan for the university system. There has been a great deal of work done to get us to this point, and I would like to thank the board members, the presidents, the task forces, and the system staff for their dedication to this effort. I would also like to thank the people across the state of North Dakota and on the campuses who gave us input, especially our students, because after all, they are the reason that we are here and doing what we do. I believe our new vision and mission and framework for transformational change will help give North Dakota the edge it needs to continue its path to greatness for generations to come. Our initial vision and robust discussions we undertook with the Pathways to Student Success Plan helped. In fact, it was the gateway that helped us get to where we are today. We've already accomplished some of the Pathways elements, such as the high school to college readiness report that is now provided through the statewide longitudinal data system. We've also achieved alignment on core courses and an agreement regarding dual credit with the Department of Public Instruction. More elements of the plan are incorporated into the plan that we are going to review today. Building on that foundation, we have developed some impressive goals around affordability, access, availability, educational excellence, and the strength of a unified system. I look forward to our discussion today, and I believe the people of North Dakota will be impressed about the direction we will set for the next 5 years. With this plan, we are going to unleash the potential of higher education for our students and our state. Moving on, item number 4, we have the interim chancellor's report. Chancellor Scogan.
Madam Chair, thank you. To begin with, I want to thank President Richmond for hosting us here today in the Skills Center in Fargo. I know for many of the folks in this room that this is the first visit to this facility. How about that?
There you go.
Okay, my apologies. I thought red meant stop, and okay, my apologies. First, I want to thank President Richmond for hosting us here today in the Skills Center. I know for many of the folks here that this is the very first visit to the NDSCS Skills Center in Fargo, and it's quite exciting to be able to see this wonderful facility in which NDSCS is serving folks in the Fargo area. As well, we're always talking about collaboration among our institutions, so we thank President Brashani for hosting the reception at his house last night. So we had 2 institutions involved in this board visit, and so we thank all of them very much. As always, I want to thank the BSC gang that shows up diligently each time to webcast these. We know that more and more people are watching this. This is as transparent as one can get. We have many folks, and we're finding out that a lot of the news media their reporters are able to sit at their desks from Dickinson to Bismarck and elsewhere around the state and watch the entire meeting. And so we really thank Bismarck State for offering this service to the State Board of Higher Ed, and this service that ensures transparency all across our great state of what's going on in the State Board of Higher Education. Now I'd like to turn, I've got 3 bullets here. The first one is a predictive analytic reporting presentation. And I was told just this morning that the UND Provost Tom DiLorenzo will be giving that instead of Josh Reedy. So Dr. DiLorenzo, if you're available, please.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you very much. Glad to be here today. Chancellor asked that we present a little bit on some of the things that we're doing on the campus, and Josh Reedy told me to make sure that I told you he wanted to be here, but I forced him to stay back there. So it's a pleasure to be here today. I'm going to go fairly quickly through this so that I leave a little bit of time in case there's some questions in the end. We wanted to talk a little bit about predictive analytics reporting and how that impacts student success. AKA, it's all about partnerships. So I think what you'll see over and over in this presentation is that we don't get anything done by ourselves, but we have to work together. It's also about data. And one of the most important things that we've been involved in over the last year is making sure that we have good data, and those data help us to make determinations. It's also the case that this is both a top-down and a bottom-up approach. So President Kelly basically said, make sure this gets done, deal with student success, look at data, and we also work with our Senate to make sure that they're involved in a collaborative governance model of how this moves forward. It's also a true partnership between academic affairs, student affairs, and finance and operations. And as you travel across the country, you'll see more and more there has to be a partnership between those operations at a university for anything to really happen. What we're talking about here is a culture change, a culture of vision, strategic decisions, and accountability. And we're looking at that culture change in resource prioritization. How is it that we prioritize our resources? We're looking at it at UND in terms of research and innovation. We're looking at it in terms of enrollment management and also in performance metrics. So today, I'm going to spend some time talking about enrollment management. And if you're intrigued enough, you might invite me back at some point to talk about the other three. But we're going to talk about enrollment management this morning. What we're really talking about here is how do you make informed decision making that leads to student success? And so how can we use data to actually predict what students will be doing when they come to college and how will they do while they're in college so that we retain students and that we ultimately graduate them? The key indicators of this particular piece of what we're looking at are retention rate and graduation rate. And I want to make sure that everyone understands that we're talking about one piece of the puzzle here. When you look at data analytics and you look at predictive mechanisms, you're talking about data across the board. And today's conversation is specifically related to retention and graduation rates. We've partnered with a group, and you'll hear me say this several times, called PAR. It's Predictive Analytics Reporting. This comes out of WICHE, of which we're a part. The system is a part of WICHE, and there's a number of individuals on the board and state legislators who are part of our group with WICHE. This was originally funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and there are probably 40 or 50 universities that are a part of this PAR framework. What this does is it literally is a massive data set where we're looking at students across multiple institutions to try and determine what are the factors that are involved in student loss and how can we prevent that student loss in the future. So again, this is the way of the future. How do you use data from multiple sources to look at what kinds of things are happening with students so that we can predict what courses they should take, what kinds of things they should be doing in school so that they graduate in a reasonable time frame. These descriptive, inferential, and predictive analyses are used to create benchmarks, and so we look at any group that we determine we want to look at. So whatever peers we determine, we can create those benchmarks, we can create these predictive models, and then we map out student success interventions. And that's the most important thing. The bottom line here is we're looking at behaviors, student behaviors that lead them into risk, and how can we create interventions so that they stay in school and they graduate on time. So you'll see here that in the PAR data set with these multiple institutions, we collect information on student demographics, student course information, student financial, all the top 4 and the bottom 2 left. We're collecting this information right now. It's all anonymous, and that's why we can look at it from multiple institutions. When we actually create the predictive models, we then take the information and put names back on it so we can actually see what kind of students are involved in our own campuses. The bottom right is potential additional factors that we might want to look at as we move forward here in North Dakota. One of the things that's important to note here, or 2 things that are important to note here, is that we could ultimately use SLDS, data to actually combine high school students with college and actually have an even more robust predictive model. This one, remember, is multiple institutions around us. So the next step would actually be looking at within North Dakota. And the SLDS data set is actually ready for us to look at as well. The other thing you won't see in this data set is anything related to ACT. And that's specifically because all of the institutions who are involved in WICHE, they don't all use ACT. And so they simply excluded ACT. It's also the case, just between us, ACT isn't that great of a predictor either. But that's not the reason they didn't use it. It's because all the institutions did not use it. So what do we get from this PAR membership? We again, are using data. The more data points they have, the more reliable your data are, so that we can speak from very strong predictive models about what kinds of things are going on. We design models, and then we test those models to see if they make a difference. And we create, you see on the right-hand side, we create interventions that we actually do on campuses to see if that makes an impact. If you look at the right there, we're identifying students at risk. And you can define risk in a number of different ways. It could be students that are not retained. It could be students that haven't passed a course. It could be students that haven't made satisfactory academic progress. It can be however you define that ultimately. And in essence, what you're trying to do is on the right-hand side, you create from common data definitions. And this is something I think you're going to wrestle with today and in the future. We don't have common data definitions, either within North Dakota or across the country. And one of the things that PAR has tried to do is to create these common data definitions so that it's apples to apples and it's not apples to oranges. And this is incredibly important. We create those predictive models, we take action, we look at benchmarks, and then we look at results. And I'll give you an example of what we did at UND in the past year. We said retention from freshman to freshman isn't good enough. From freshman to freshman, we've been hovering around 75%. The national average for institutions, research institutions, public research institutions across the country is 85%. So how can we create these predictive models that lead to action and actually lead us to make some changes? And in 1 year, we moved from 75% retention rate to 80%. That's a massive change in 1 year. You won't find that anywhere else in the country at any point in history, literally. A 5% change in retention rate from freshman to sophomore. So that's what we do. We look at measurable results. We look at how we're performing, and then you change your predictive model based on that. So our approach has been, for example, we created an online catalog. We never had an online catalog. So within a year, we created an online catalog. I think at some point later today, Chancellor, there's going to be some discussion about dashboards. We created iDashboard, so you have data at your fingertips to make immediate decisions. Within 6 weeks, we had produced 65 dashboards for faculty and chairs to be able to determine what is it that we're doing, how do we make changes. We had a problem with common course scheduling, so students told us over and over that I can't get the courses in the sequence because they're offered in the wrong sequence. So we made a significant change in that. We also have a degree audit planner system. I meet with students about once a month over dinner, and I met with them last night, and one of the things they said again was that I'm not quite sure where I am. I think I'm going to graduate in the spring, but I'm not quite sure. And we need a system that lets them know and shares the data across campus, and we're almost ready to launch this degree audit system. And then we're opening a one-stop student services center on campus in the next couple of days. That's a situation where students can come either physically or virtually and have all their questions answered by one person. We modeled this after another university, and in the first year, 44,000 inquiries came in, and 96.3% of those initial inquiries were handled by the first person that touched it. We're going to get rid of what we call the Twomley Shuffle, and so we're very excited about that as well. We created 4-year graduation plans. The bottom line is that if you don't have a graduation plan, you can't graduate. We assessed it. 11% of our departments had 4-year graduation plans. In 6 months, 100% had 4-year graduation plans. We had a policy on campus where you didn't have to declare a major at some point in time. And again, looking at the data, we had almost 200 students who hadn't declared a major by senior year. If you don't declare a major, you can't graduate. And so the faculty senate, or the university senate stepped up and just recently at the last meeting passed a policy where you have to declare a major by 60 credits. That puts students on a path to graduate in 4 years. Can they change? Of course they can. But it sets a path so that they can graduate in a period of time. We also, this slide is meant to just say that this is a lot of work. It's unbelievable the amount of work that goes into this. So we had student account services, housing, first-year student outreach through our Student Success Center, working to find out where are students, each and every student, where's the problem so that we can get them back on track so that they can graduate. What are some of our next steps? Going back to PAR, we've determined that through this PAR analysis that any student who withdraws from a course is at higher risk for not returning the second year. And as they withdraw from more courses, the risk goes up. So now that tells us you got to drill down, and as soon as they're thinking about withdrawing, you intervene. One of our strategies on campus has been to tell students it's okay to sign up for 15 credits because you can always just drop 3 credits. That's the wrong way of going based on the data now. So this data helps us. We also found out here, quite interestingly, that you're at higher risk if you're over 24 when you start college. And that kind of ran contrary to what most of us thought. Actually, there's far less risk of coming back if you're 18 or 19. And we can discuss why that is, but the first step is just to collect the data and see what is it that we know from this. We also know from this data high failure rate courses. And we can actually go into those courses and determine why is it that they're high failure rate and how can we change them, either the courses or to help students be more prepared for those courses so that they'll be successful. One other initiative we have right now is that we know from the data that student engagement helps students stay in school, and we're working right now on internships, undergraduate research, and all those other kinds of things as ways to help students stay in school. In the end, we're using the PAR data to integrate with an early alert system so that we use the data to target those students who actually are at high risk and to do things very early. And the preliminary data based on pilots that we've run is students love this in 2 different ways. I heard students last night tell me, on the one hand, they actually have faculty members who are now sending notes through email, sending kudos for saying, you were talking in class. That's great. And the second one is they're getting notes now saying you're not attending class. Where are you? And that's an important part of how you take this risk data and you look at early alert systems to start working with students very early on. These are a couple of other areas, and I won't touch them now because I don't want to take too much time. It is scalable to NDUS if we ultimately choose to do that. We've had an enormously positive relationship with NDUS and SITS with collecting data that are now reliable. We actually can have the use of data that are reliable, and we can interpret them in many ways. We can also use PAR across the system, and I think it's been included in the budget in the future. And ultimately, we're looking at student success. How can we use this information to recruit, retain, and graduate students? We can also use this information on our strategic planning, and you could use it in performance-based funding as well. If we're doing what we should be doing, the money should come back at some point to help in other ways. One of the areas we know is we need to do a better job at advising. And advising is expensive, and we need help in doing that ultimately, and we hope to demonstrate that that'll happen. Let me end by saying Clayton Christensen just recently, I took this off of the web this morning, and these are the kind of issues that I hope we'll talk about in the future. And these are the things that really make an academic like me smile. What do we do with this beyond? And he gave a presentation very recently about what higher education should know about disruptive innovation. The first is that disruptive innovation presents a great opportunity for higher education, and we can talk about all the ways that that's the case. The second is that modularization will change funding opportunities for universities, and that's breaking up what we do in a variety of ways. And the final part is that odds are against high-end online classes beating traditional education. But again, that's important for who we are in North Dakota right now, and that would lead to some interesting discussion as well. It's all about student experience. It's all about keeping them in school, retaining them, and graduating them in a reasonable time period. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. DiLorenzo will remain here for questions here if you have any. This is a very, very exciting thing. UND is certainly our pilot program in this, and on the budget request that you approved that has already been forwarded now to OMB, there is a line item to try to implement PAR system-wide, and so that all of the institutions can be tied into this sort of analytics. And it really is all about student retention and student success and graduation rates and so forth. So any questions at all?
Thank you, Dr. DiLorenzo. Oh, push the button? I was on. Okay, I was on. Okay. Thank you, Dr. DiLorenzo. I guess I had two questions. With starting the early alert system at UND, what was the process like for that?
We solicited faculty members who were technologically savvy and who were ready to do this and said, let's get started this fall. And so we have a group that are ready to do it. We do it through Blackboard, those who are on Blackboard, and they've rolled it out. Ultimately, the plan is to go with the whole semester.
Sure. Was there any policy changes that need to be made internally within UND, or was it something you're able to unilaterally do?
No policy changes. It's the right thing to do. We want to work with faculty to make this happen. So we haven't made any policy changes at this point.
Okay. Thank you. And you also talked a lot about data definitions and making sure that those are consistent. And I noticed the bottom of that pyramid was the NDUS partnership.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's a really critical piece. I think one of the things that's problematic is that we all look at things differently. We don't have common data definitions. And I think we're getting to the point with Lisa Feldner's group where we actually, it's apples to apples now. And you can actually start looking at what's the meaning of this particular variable in multiple settings.
Sure.
And given where you are in school, Chris, I knew you'd be intrigued with this.
Thanks for answering questions. And it'd be interesting to hear some of the other facets of the report that you mentioned, especially with particular recommendations in terms of what we can do as a board in regards, and NDUS system-wide regards to, especially with data definitions, making sure that all 11 institutions are being consistent with how they report things.
I think you're absolutely right.
Thank you.
I think we're fortunate to have Chris's expertise on the board.
Yes.
With data definitions, do we have to, and this is just, I just don't know, do we have to break it down? Are data definitions different for the research universities versus the regional versus the two-year schools?
The definition should not be different. It's how you ultimately use the data to make determinations, and we should be different ultimately. Our community colleges are doing incredibly well with retention. So although we should define retention the same way across the schools, that's not an area that they necessarily will work on. And so we need the common data definitions across schools, but how we use it and how we manipulate it may be different.
Thank you.
Tom, maybe just for the benefit of the board, we're used to looking at data that's several years in the making, so to speak. How immediate would the data be available with this?
This will be real time. We have data up to, let's see, this is fall. We have data up to spring of 2014 now. So as we use it and integrate it more, and I can check with Lisa Feldner, I'm pretty sure we have this up to fall 2014. So this will be almost real time.
And if we get the funding through the legislature for this to implement it system-wide, what do you see as potential hurdles to getting that accomplished once the funds are there, if there are any?
I'm trying to think of how to answer your question in multiple ways. When the initial funds are there, then we make progress, and then the funds come back to us ultimately because we're successful. But it does take a culture change in that we're not used to looking at data in this way, and we're not used to having staff and others use the tools to interpret data in this way. So there is a funding need to get us up to speed to make that culture shift. Once you make the culture shift, it sustains it on its own. But there is a culture shift that has to be made because you're actually looking at data to make decisions.
Right.
I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, it does, and I think my point is that we, as a board, need to understand if the funding's there. This isn't just as simple as clicking a switch, and this is system-wide. I mean, this.
No.
There will be some implementation hurdles that we have to go over that are even beyond funding.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm looking at Lisa because I get passionate about this and I'm excited about this, but this has been a hard year. I mean, you have to amass the resources and the staff, and you've got to push and push and push, and you've got to change the way you do things, and you've got to say this data isn't good. This doesn't make sense. Why are these students doing this? And you have to have a different mentality to wrestle with that. And that's a culture shift. And it does take time and energy, and it does take capital resources to do that. But in the end, it's exciting what can happen. I mean, I point back to our retention rate of changing from 75 to 80% in 1 year. That's unbelievable. And it was hard, but that's what we have to produce for North Dakota. We can do that.
Thank you.
Dr. Murphy.
I guess it's on. Very interesting, Provost. My question, I've got several short questions. One is, one of the elements that we've seen at both of the research institutions, and I think that's highlighted in Oleva's report, is that about half of the students who are not retained are successful students. So how will this help us to identify what are the factors that make these students ultimately leave our institutions and perhaps go elsewhere? And are those students going elsewhere? And where are they going? And how can we use these data to help move this forward to retaining those students?
It's a good question. Just because students leave doesn't mean they're not successful. It doesn't mean they're failures. And I think the first question to determine is, what's the right number that come in and what's the right number that come out? If a student comes to one of our institutions and moves on and graduates and stays a lifelong learner, that was a success. So, using iPED's data to simply look at one single variable is not the way to go. So that's number one. The second thing is that, I lost my thought. What was the first thing that you had said?
Well, ultimately, how do we use this to retain those students?
Yeah, ultimately, how do we use it? So, for example, we've gone and called students and said, you haven't signed up. We knew, okay, so we used the data to go look and see which students hadn't signed up for housing. Mm-hmm. And then we called them and said, why didn't you sign up for housing? And they said, well, I had $50 that I didn't pay. Okay, well then let's pay it. Let's write it off. Let's do whatever, and then you sign up. And by the way, I can sign you up right now. It's been taken care of, let's sign you up. Or we have students who say, I have a significant family issue and blah, blah, blah. Okay, then let's get you involved with a counselor right now. And so having that data, especially in these dashboards, you can make immediate decisions. You can help students through these immediate issues and keep them in school. Another issue which we've seen, and all of our campuses have seen, is that there's some students who come to college who aren't quite ready. And quite frankly, we should have them move on to something else earlier rather than later. It's easier to move on if you don't have a GPA than if you have a GPA of 0.0. And you can determine that now. We can determine with 90+% predictive reliability, I look at Chris, how a student is going to do before they step on campus on these particular courses. So we want to make sure that they're in the right courses when they get there, and then monitor them throughout. We want to make sure that faculty members provide them feedback within the first 2 weeks. And that may not be traditionally how faculty members do that, but if we present that to faculty members, so it gives us immediate data. I mean, it gives us stuff that we can work on right away to make sure students stay in school.
So that drives the point to the second question, which is ultimately one of the large issues that I run into as a faculty member. And I hear this all the time with interactions with students across our campus, is, I've changed majors 5 times, and I might have been in aviation. Well, I decided to go into aviation management. Well, now I'm doing marketing. Now I'm in chemistry. And you look at these changes, and as a faculty member, you're thinking, wow, your classes, you went some down this path, and then you go over this path, and there's a lot of classes that don't overlap. So what can we do better, and how will this system help us give students a little bit better opportunity on how to go through this morass? Because that is a large issue.
It is. And number one is you have to recognize that students change majors 4.2 times before they ever graduate. My daughter changed 4 times before she stepped on campus. And it was because of the rules that the university had. She said, I want to live with Courtney, and they won't let me live with Courtney because we have different majors. Okay, Kendall, let's change majors. Boom, you do it. So we have barriers that get in the way, and we have to recognize that students change majors multiple times. And to getting to your point, the more we can make sure that courses, basic courses, cover multiple majors, exactly, you don't lose time. And then you can graduate on time. And that's where we can work with faculty members. We can say that you're going into nursing, you take biology 101. Here's a person that's going into respiratory therapy. They're taking biology 102. Why? If we can do the same course, then they can switch and not lose any time.
And that drives me to the last question, is ultimately will these data be useful in perhaps redesigning the general education requirements so there is more overlap, and perhaps adding classes like other institutions have that give them a little more breadth to that? So a student, instead of taking a traditional English composition class, might want to take a technical writing class. and it fulfills that composition requirement. Is that a possibility?
It could absolutely be used in that way.
Thank you.
Yes. Alfred.
So, looking at the staff perspective of this, right now, it's my understanding Josh is working with this, and as we expand this at UND and others, we're going to need the advisors, and you have to have the staff to monitor the data through Lisa, apparently. So we're talking, it takes human resources also to make this successful.
Right.
And just with the few resources we've already put into it, the success is tremendous.
Right. Yeah, and I think what this allows us to do is to use the data to say, in this step, in this predictive model, this is what we're doing, and then what's the next step? And I've already had people laying out things like, what position is necessary to take this to the next level? And are we going to reallocate that, or do we need a new one there, or do we need training for that, or what's going to happen next? And so you literally lay out a pathway. We're doing this first, then we're doing this next, then we're doing this next. So that one slide that I showed you was that we called it the 120, 90, 75 model. You deal with students who have 120 credits first because they have got to get out. And we hold a little bit on the 75s, not a long time, but you get those out, then you move on to that, then you move on to that. And then once you have it done the first time, now you reorient to the next step. And so you're constantly changing staffing needs over time. And that's a training issue. It's not switching staff, it's a training issue.
Okay. I have one quick question. Going back to the cultural change, do you anticipate resistance to the cultural change? I mean,
No.
this is so exciting. You know, but if-
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I'm a clinical psychologist by training. No one likes to change. None of us do. It's not
Right.
just faculty. None of us like change. But the bottom line is that when I can point out that we made a 75 to 80% retention, and it wasn't me, it was the faculty that did that because of the things they have done, it makes them feel very good, and they want to be committed. They want to know, what can I do? And through using data, we can give them very specific information. And they just, I mean, the number who came on board with the early alert system, the pilot, I was shocked, the number. And to hear students say how wonderful that is. And it's a difference between, it doesn't have to be one-on-one. That's not how students operate right now. It's through the technology. They're getting feedback through Blackboard saying, you aren't in class, where are you? Or, you're speaking up in class, that is great. It allows that personal feedback, and so I think the faculty then get excited. They see the changes that are being made, and that moves along.
And because my reason for asking that is, you know, we've requested dollars to do this system-wide, and I would like to make sure that that happens.
Yep.
If we get that money, that we do this. Okay.
I do have a couple questions. Number one, you talked earlier, is this correct?
Do we need some training on the microphone?
Red button's on.
Well, first we're going to collect some data.
Yeah, there you go. I had a question. Earlier you talked about advisors and
Yes.
the need to grow more advisors
Yeah.
in certain areas of study.
Right.
Have you looked into a mentorship program or programs where you're tying senior students to freshman students in some sort of reimbursement maybe for mentors?
Absolutely,
throughout the program?
and I'll just say two things about that. Number one is if you get the degree audit system in place, which we're almost there, then students can go in and look 24/7 where they are in the process. And that is sort of the old advising function. Now we move into a mentoring function. And the research shows that both peer mentors as well as faculty mentors play a huge impact coupled with the technological piece of the degree audit system. Yes.
And is peer-to-peer mentorship stronger than faculty to student mentorship?
It depends
or-
it depends on what data you look at, but the very basic psychological research that's been done show that peers are much more influential than parents once students get to college.
And
So we want to integrate peers more and more into that advising function, yes.
And is there any additional funding or methods?
It's an excellent point, though we also know that the more that students
that.
stay on campus and earn their funds, the more likely they will be retained. So if you can put them on campus and pay them a small amount, instead of going to McDonald's, they will stay.
Right.
And these are the jobs that are for them. So more and more students are coming to school that need some amount of funding. If we can use that funding to help, that can help them stay on campus and be retained longer.
And it could help the first-year students stay in school.
Absolutely. And then as soon as you're retained to the second year, you've made a big leap at that point.
Right. Thank you.
One last quick question, I think, and then we need to move on.
This will show that, so if a student, I'll use my daughter as an example, came to UND, did her first 2 years, was very successful at UND, but the degree plan that she wants to graduate in is offered at NDSU, has now transferred successfully to NDSU. This will help us see her as a success, not as a failure for UND. Correct?
Absolutely. I mean, the beauty of this is that if students move from within our system, those are success stories. And that's what we should be promoting. And we should be able to say to students who come to UND who are having a rough time in the first 2 weeks, you know, this is a big university. This may not be the right place for you right now. And here, I'm going to hand you off to someone from the next place. I'm going to take you there and get you set up. And you're not going to lose any time, any credit, anything, because we have it all set up along the way. The final thing that I'll say, if I could just add one very quick story, is that with this degree audit system, you have parents involved as well. And I'll just give you one quickie about my own son, that I was able to monitor him through his college career. And I called him one day when he was a freshman in his senior year, and I said, Nate, we need to get together and talk about you finishing up. And as students do, he put me off to the point where I met with him, and I said, Nate, looks like you're going to be done this spring, right? And he said, no, Dad, I'm going to have to stay another year. And I said, well, quite frankly, I pulled up the degree audit system, and it looks like to me you have 12 credits left, and they're all electives. You're graduating in May, son. And you know what it led to is a discussion with him about his fears for the future. He said, I don't know what I'll do. I've only ever known 4 years of school. And I said, I can get you set up. We go to career counseling, whatever. And the day after he graduated, he had a job. He was ready to go. But it gave us the data to deal with it at that point in time. So as parents, you can also have that data, and you can work with your child on where we need to go beyond that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I had asked President Kelly if he would provide an update to you on a couple of issues at UND as well, relative to the accreditation at the medical school and testing at the law school. So President Kelly, please.
Thank you, Chancellor Scogan. Am I still on? Madam Chair, members of the board, good morning. I appreciate the opportunity of being able to bring to you some issues related to the UND School of Medicine and Health Sciences and the UND School of Law. Pardon me. With me this morning are the deans of both institutions, so when you begin asking questions, I'll be referring to them. With your permission, I'm going to, in the interest of time, just read a few comments, and we'll open this for discussion. First, let me say that we're extremely proud of both of these schools and the services that they provide to the state of North Dakota. Our state has a great need for both health and legal professionals, and the exceptional faculty members of these two schools work very hard to thoroughly prepare young people to graduate from their programs and move quickly and successfully to the next phase of their training or their careers. Let me start with the School of Law, and I'd like to bring to you just a few fundamental background facts. The UND School of Law has an average entering class of 80 to 90 students, an overall student body of around 250 students. The school is consistently ranked among the best value law schools in the United States. The school has a particular focus on creating practice-ready lawyers to meet the critical legal needs throughout our state. This includes family law, financial, estate planning, real estate, housing law, to the complexities of criminal and constitutional law. As you all know, the School of Law is currently undergoing a renovation and expansion. We're very grateful for that. The members of the 2013 North Dakota State Legislature and Governor Dalrymple supported an $11.4 million appropriation for this renovation upon your recommendation. The project is on time, on budget. It's expected to be completed by the fall of 2015. You may also have read recently that there is an issue concerning the bar examination pass rates for our School of Law. Let me begin by providing some background information about the exam. Since 2011, North Dakota has administered the Uniform Bar Examination, the UBE. We're one of 14 states who currently administer this particular exam. The two-day exam consists of 3 parts, a 6-hour objective test with 200 multiple choice questions. It counts for 50% of the total score. 2 90-minute task-oriented questions designed to assess practical skills, which count as 20% of the core. And 3-hour exam, a 3-hour exam, which essay questions targeting substantive areas of knowledge, counting as 30% of the total score. North Dakota generally offers the bar exam twice each year, in July and February. Only graduates of ABA-approved law schools may sit for the bar, and a graduate may attempt to pass the exam 6 times. This summer, there was a drop in the percentage of our UND Law School graduates who passed the bar exam. The first-time pass rate in North Dakota bar was 56% for UND graduates and 64% for students overall, including those who trained elsewhere before taking the North Dakota exam. While these figures fell below the levels of students who passed the bar in 2012 and 2013, I'd note that North Dakota was not the only state, and UND was not the only law school that saw this kind of drop on the July 2014 bar exam. Now, we believe that this is an aberration, but nevertheless, the School of Law is working to better prepare our graduates for the bar exam. We appointed a new director of bar passage, academic success, in August of 2014. The director will develop a new bar preparation course to be offered in spring of 2015. The director also is developing and implementing other strategies to provide academic support to law students. A recent change to the state's rules now allows us to obtain UND graduates' bar exam scores, and we're using this data to make informed decisions about how best to prepare our students for the bar exam. We'll keep you updated on our progress. Now let me turn to the School of Medicine and Health Sciences. You may also have recently read about a report to our school from the Liaison Committee on Medical Education, the LCME, which identifies areas of compliance. The School of Medicine and Health Sciences, which admitted 78 medical students this year, remains accredited by the LCME. Please let me repeat that. We remain accredited by the LCME. The report noted that interprofessional education, commitment to diversity, support by the state of North Dakota were institutional strengths. However, the LCME has voted to place the medical education program leading to the MD degree on what they call warning status. It was determined that the school was not in compliance with 10 of its 132 standards, 10 of 132 standards, and was in compliance, but needed some further monitoring for 5 other standards. The elements of the program identified as problematic can be grouped into 3 general categories: technical, curricular, and organizational. Technical elements include issues of program policy and procedure. The curricular components are focused on content, delivery, and evaluation. And the organizational elements are focused on the shared governance model employed for many years at UND among the regionally distributed campuses to deliver quality medical education. Digress for just a second. We are a community-based medical school. We use the entire resource of the state of North Dakota and the health professions to educate medical and health sciences students. So by de facto definition, we are decentralized. We participate in the medical education of virtually every health professional site in the state of North Dakota. So hold that thought as we move ahead here. The majority of these issues were previously identified by the school as it engaged in a comprehensive self-study in preparation for the LCME survey visit. Action plans constructed by groups of faculty and administration were already in place and progressing by the time the survey visit took place in March of this year. On the basis of the LCME's findings, 5 working groups of faculty and administration have been refining the action plan according to the expectations of each of the referenced accreditation standards. On September 11th and 12th of this year, 2 representatives of the LCME visited the school to assist the working groups in the development of the action plan, which will be submitted to the LCME by December 1st of this year for its approval. By that time, the school expects that each of the technical elements of the medical education program identified as problematic will have been corrected. Progress on each of the remaining curricular and organizational elements will also be documented with a specific timeline provided for completion by the time a limited survey to NDSCS will be conducted by the LCME in late summer or fall of 2015 next year. The date is yet to be determined. I'm confident the school will address these issues, come into compliance with all 132 standards within a year or so. As it does, it will be following a pattern followed by many other medical schools in recent review. In fact, it turns out that the LCME has taken actions similar to those at UND at about 1 in 3 medical schools it has evaluated over the last few years, more than double the previous rate. So as we go forward, the school will continue to focus on the strong outcomes it produces today. We'll do even more for the people of North Dakota in the future. So I want to thank the Chancellor for the opportunity of bringing this bit of information to the board. Be happy to respond to any questions, and if you would like, bring the 2 deans of these schools to join me to respond to your questions.
Board members. Comments, questions?
This is a very quick one, and thank you, President Kelly, for your report. Do you know what the second and third attempt pass rates are? Because I mean, the first year pass rates, I mean, even though we were still under par, it still wasn't that different. And I was curious to know what the second or third pass rates were. Make sure that maybe by the third try, that maybe 90 or 95% or some benchmark are passing the bar exam.
I can't help but prefer that, Chris, to the dean of the school. So
Sure.
let me ask Catherine Rand to join me. Catherine, I'm not sure this is on. Does anyone know which button pushes?
Is that on?
No.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to address this issue with the board. I greatly appreciate it. This is one we care about very much. We don't ordinarily track or report multiple test-taking results on the bar exam because the ABA doesn't require us to. But we did look at that, and I just yesterday got some compiled information from our Director of Career Services. With multiple test takers, our pass rate generally is 90% or better.
Okay. Thank you.
Dr. Murphy.
So my question ultimately, I also, when I looked at these data and I read some of the things provided, feel that this is an anomaly. But have there been any changes that's occurred in the last several years that could have impacted this number, either attrition of faculty, changes in faculty teaching relatively important courses for bar preparation? And lastly, well, let's start there.
So between the 2013 July exam and the 2014 July exam, we saw a 20 percentage point drop in the pass rate. There is no discernible difference in the qualifications of the students looking at their LSAT scores and undergraduate GPAs, the admissions index, nor is there a discernible difference in their law school GPA, which is the most reliable indicator, both in North Dakota and nationally, for whether a graduate will pass the bar, their law school GPA. We also looked at a number of other things. There have been no dramatic changes to our curriculum in that time that would have had that kind of impact. We've spoken with other schools and know that other states had similar drops with, again, no changes in the qualifications of their students, their educational program, etc. We're not exactly sure what's going on. There are a number of other factors that could come into play. One might be how the students are preparing for the bar exam. And there are commercial bar preparation courses that are traditionally taken after graduation. Those have changed markedly in the last few years from what I experienced as in-class daily lectures and weekly sample tests for 8 weeks to now you download it on your phone so that you can just listen to the podcast at any time that's convenient for you. That's one of the things we'll address, but I'm not sure that I can connect causation to it. We've also had a relatively recent change in the North Dakota bar exam, the move to the uniform bar exam. We were one of the first adopters of the uniform bar exam. And of course, half of the bar exam is graded and scaled nationally, and half of the bar exam is graded and scaled locally. So we don't know how those things might have impacted this as well, but we are looking at all of those factors.
And the faculty, have there been any changes in faculty who are teaching these classes that might go back to that? I mean, because I'm thinking it's a longitudinal issue. You're in law school for 3 years, and then you go take the bar, and you sit for the bar, hopefully. That's the plan. And so I'm just curious if there has been any changes that have been occurring that might have impacted perhaps, a faculty member switch the courses they taught or something along those lines that might also impact this. Because it's interesting how it truly is an anomaly. And I think, though, from your plan in action that it's well in hand. Lastly, the MCQ portion, or the multiple choice question portion, using medical school lingo there, I guess. But, and congratulations on winning the malpractice bowl, by the way.
Thank you.
Are you able to get those numbers and then look at how each student has done, or how collectively the student body has done, to see if there's a particular area that's perhaps deficient? And is that part of your strategy to address this?
Yes, and thanks for that question. Beginning in 2009, we sought a rule change in North Dakota at the level of the Supreme Court to allow us to have the data regarding how our graduates performed on the North Dakota bar exam. This is information that we routinely receive from other states like Minnesota, but until 2013, North Dakota did not give us that information, but instead simply stated the overall pass rate and gave us the same information that was made available to the public. We're so grateful for that rule change and for the work of the State Board of Law Examiners and the State Supreme Court in helping us get this data. So in North Dakota, for our graduates who pass the exam, we learn their names and we learn their overall score. For our graduates who fail the exam, we learn their names and we learn the breakdown of their scores on the multiple choice part, the essay part, and the practice test part. For us to look at particular areas of the law, North Dakota only reports, for example, essay question number 1, essay question number 2. Minnesota, which we expect to get next week, will tell us what were the subjects tested on those essay questions. But so far, just looking at the North Dakota numbers, it doesn't appear that there's a particular substantive area that's causing our students problems, nor does it appear that there is a specific part of the exam that's causing them problems. But I do caution that we only have 2 years' worth of data from North Dakota on that.
Thank you very much.
I have a question about the law schools in other parts of the country. What is their pass rate initially? And I think I read it someplace in the documentation that I received over the last few weeks, but I can't remember what it was and I can't remember where I read it.
Sure. So every state administers a bar exam. Some states use the uniform bar exam, a relatively new product that 14 states have adopted. Other states use some multi-state components like the multiple choice, and a few states have state-specific bar exams. Bar passage rates over the last decade or so vary greatly. Some states might have a 50% pass rate, other states might have a 90% pass rate. No state has a 100% pass rate. No law school has a 100% pass rate. What we generally look for is consistency in that pass rate in each state across time, watching out for dramatic dips. The dramatic dips might make us think that something has changed. So it's not unusual for a state to have pass rates in the numbers that we have in North Dakota. It's the dip that's causing us the greatest concern. And then, of course, I don't want nearly 50% of our graduates to fail the bar exam on the first time. That is not our goal for our graduates. And regardless of whether the pass rate might fall within the acceptable range, we want to do better for our graduates and for our state.
And what would the University of Minnesota, for example, what would be their pass rate during the same time frame?
I don't know their pass rate from the July 2014 exam because they have not yet released that. I can, if you give me just a moment, dig up their national data.
And what's an acceptable pass rate? 75?
The ABA defines an acceptable pass rate as one that is generally within 15 percentage points of the state's overall pass rate. So a school's pass rate, an individual law school's pass rate, generally would get a very careful look if it fell below 15 percentage points. We're not even close to that. We're within 8, I think, percentage points of the state pass rate. So that's how the ABA judges an acceptable pass rate. For me, thinking about our students and their success and our state's need for well-qualified attorneys, I would like to do a lot better than that.
Because I would assume that this, the pass rate is somewhat tied to whether a student will apply for your law school or not, as they're looking at the data, correct?
Yes.
So we would want that to be as strong as we can get that.
Absolutely. And we publicly disclose our ABA reporting on our bar pass rate for the last 5 years. Anyone can find it on our website. We highlight it for prospective students, and that takes into account our ABA reporting requirements, where we track our student first-time test takers' success in every jurisdiction in which they take the bar exam. North Dakota is a big piece of that, but generally there are about a half dozen states or more in which our graduates take the bar exam.
And I think as you're looking that up, Dr. Nguyen, you know what? I think you probably have this under control of what's happening at the med school. When would be a good date for you to come back with a progress report? How much time would it be? Because I don't think we have to get into the details of what's happening there, but let's set some time up for you to come back and speak with us about this.
Madam Chair, members of the board, the time frame is obviously at your discretion. The action plan will be submitted to the LCME on December 1st of this year. The LCME will, as we expect, approve it at their February 2015 meeting, and then we'll have a limited site visit, survey visit coming back probably in the fall of 2015. So probably the most logical time, if the question were posed to me, for a progress report would be on or about December 1st when we submit the actual action plan. Now that action plan has, a draft of it has been completed and was recently distributed to all faculty and students for feedback on it. Once we get that feedback over the next 2 months, that'll be incorporated into what is now a draft document and then be submitted. So I would think sometime on or about December 1st would be a logical time for a progress report.
Okay, we'd appreciate that.
Two quick questions.
Okay.
Well, let's see. Okay, thank you, Dean Nguyen. I'd like, one thing is, the LCME has a number of different definitions for terminology on probationers. there's accredited on probation and credit on warning, and then there's unaccredited, of course, and there's accredited. Are we on warning or on probation?
Okay,
it's an
so-
important distinction.
Thank you, Professor Murphy. I'll make two comments. First of all, I agree with you completely. First of all, my own personal observation is that the LCME uses confusing language that is not internally consistent, and they actually have recognized that. And let me tease that out a little bit. When President Kelly mentioned the context of this, that there is now what they call adverse actions for medical schools occurring in at least 1 in 3 medical schools today. They lump together all of these phrases together, but they're very different. We are, as the President emphasized, accredited. What the warning means, that is, if we do not address these issues successfully, which I fully anticipate we will, over the next year, then our accreditation might be in jeopardy. That's completely different from probation, which we are not on. And by the way, the frequency with which the probation categorization has been used has jumped 5-fold over the last 15 years. So we are not in that category, and quite frankly, we're nowhere near that. But for the standpoint of adverse actions, they lump together anything where you don't have the usual 8-year review cycle. So I am the chair of an LCME review committee of a major medical school, one of the top 10 medical schools in the United States, coming up in November. They have identical citations to ours. They did not get the warning label, but they're still in the same category. Basically, the way you figure this out, here's the simple way. Go to the LCME website, and when it says, when is the return visit, and if it says pending, that means they're in this global category of we're going to have a limited site visit rather than saying you're good to go for 8 years. So we're on the milder side of being in that big group, but it's a big group where they use a lot of different terms. So I agree with you, Professor Murphy, that the LCME data themselves are a little confusing, but we're on the more mild side. We're nowhere near probation or actual withdrawal of accreditation.
Thank you.
Okay. Did you want to quickly say your...
Yes, thank you so much. I brought with me the current issue of the ABA Journal. This is a national magazine that goes out to every lawyer member of the American Bar Association. North Dakota and its need for attorneys in rural areas of the state, as well as the lawyer shortage in rural America generally, is on the cover of the ABA magazine, and also UND School of Law's program, the Rural Justice Initiative, a partnership with the State Bar Association, is featured in the article as well. So I just wanted to thank all of you for your support of UND School of Law.
Did you have the pass rate for Minnesota by chance?
Yes. For the last 10 years, I don't know what 13 and 14 were, but for the last 10 years, generally in the 80%.
Okay.
They just adopted the uniform bar exam, though, last year.
Which we did last year as well, correct?
We adopted in 2011.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, President Kelly. And now my last bullet is on current issues.
Mike again.
It is on.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you. The last 2 weeks have been quite the weeks for open records and open meetings for your system office. As you know, last week Attorney General Wayne Stenjum offered 2 opinions that we were in violation of the law on 2 incidences. The first opinion was that the State Board of Higher Education violated open meetings laws when the Higher Learning Commission interviewed members in April. The other was that Minot State University and the North Dakota University system violated open records law in handling a request for records held at Minot State. When it comes to open meetings and records laws, there is no doubt that only one opinion counts, and that is the Attorney General's. We accept that fact without any quibblings or qualms. Relative to the open meeting in April, our requirement was to repost the agenda and provide meeting minutes. Today, you approve those minutes. We have complied with the Attorney General's directives. On the second issue, all those records had already been turned over to the requester, and thus the Attorney General found no remediation required. In all of this, what I take exception to are the board's detractors who immediately jump on these opinions as evidence that the board isn't overseeing the system properly. That simply is not the case. You board members are citizen soldiers dedicated to our state and to our students. You come from all walks of life, are successful professionals, and hail from across our state. Among your duties defined in the North Dakota Constitution is the responsibility to have full authority over the institution under the board's control, with the right among its powers to prescribe, limit, or modify the courses offered at the several institutions. Furthermore, you are instructed to do each and everything necessary and proper for the efficient and economic administration of the state educational institutions. These are big responsibilities. You meet frequently in open meetings, have robust discussions, and make important decisions relative to those responsibilities. For day-to-day activities, however, you have delegated responsibility at the institutional level to the presidents and at the system level to the chancellor. The delegated responsibility on both these Attorney General opinions therefore falls to me. Prior to the Higher Learning Committee meeting, we, the staff, including legal counsel, discussed the ramifications of open meeting laws. We thought we'd covered all our bases, got rooms at the Capitol for the interviews, invited the media, arranged for phone lines, and posted the notice. As the Attorney General pointed out, the agenda posted by the NDUS gives the date, time, and location of the interview. We concluded because the Higher Learning Commission was developing the questions and the board was simply responding to them, that no board action would be taken. So we included in the notice board business would not be discussed. We made a judgment call, and the Attorney General disagreed with our conclusion. On the other decision, we deal with records requests every day, lots of them. In this case, a records request was submitted to Minot State University. Attorneys at the university system helped review it and initially denied it, concluding the documents likely contained student information protected by federal law. But as the Attorney General pointed out, NDUS did not initially conduct a review of the responsive records to determine whether personally identified information could be redacted before denying the records request. After the initial request was denied, the attorneys reviewed the documents, redacted them appropriately, and turned over 189 records to the requester. The board is not at fault for these day-to-day staff decisions. In the 15 months I've sat in this office, these two decisions represent the only violations of open meetings and open record laws occurring in these 15 months. And the volume of requests for open records is enormous. You currently have attorneys who spend the lion's share of their time reviewing and redacting communications to turn over to requesters. At one point about a month ago, I shared with you that on one request, we've turned over in excess of 100,000 pages of emails, and it has taken 1,100 hours of attorney's time to review just those, and that's only one request. Open records law are certainly designed to ensure a transparent government. We all agree on the need for that. But what has happened is these laws are being used by some politically motivated individuals. Now our communications is becoming a fishing pond into which these individuals cast wide nets in the hope of finding something to use against political opponents or for political purposes. In just the last few days, we've received over a dozen new open records, some of which appear to be politically motivated on both sides of the aisle. Despite this fact, we will comply with the law. In the multitude of requests and thousands of documents we review and return over, we hope to always comply with the law. As was noted last week, sometimes we'll be found in violation. But please know that these violations are not because anyone flagrantly violates laws to keep information from the public. Any violations representing judgment calls made by staff based on their understanding of the nuances of the law. As I've indicated, we have made literally hundreds of judgment calls on open records and meeting laws. Overwhelmingly, most of the time we get it right. Sometimes we don't. I appreciate the Fargo Forum's view on these two issues decided last week. Quote, "If there is good news in all of this, it's that the board and staff are sincere about doing the right thing. Given recent history, the board should be granted the benefit of the doubt. In other words, an honest mistake was made. There was no intent to circumvent the law." There is no doubt about the authority for governing the university system which rests with you, the State Board of Higher Education. However, you have delegated the day-to-day operations to presidents and the chancellor. I assure you that on the daily decisions in my office, we are all trying to make the best calls we can relative to complying with open meetings and open records laws. We are sincere in our desire to do it right. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Scogan. Item number 5, North Dakota Student Association report.
Members of the board.
Good morning.
We had our last meeting on September 19th and the 20th down in Wahpeton, hosted by NDSCS, and we are grateful to have it there. We had our meeting one of the days in the Diesel Tech building down there, which was a different venue. We've never really done something like that before, and it gave us a chance to see kind of what NDSCS is all about and what they do for their students, and we were really grateful to have the opportunity. We discussed our strategic plan that we're going to be going forward with. We have one currently, but we're discussing on how we're going to revamp that, to revise it and make it better. We had 3 separate resolutions brought before us throughout the night in one of our committees. Those of you unfamiliar with our process, we have 3 committees that we go through. And we had 3 of them, and 2 of them we tabled to discuss more at our later meetings, one for the October meeting, one for our November meeting. And one of our resolutions we passed, and I will read that resolution for you. The resolution was a resolution in support of the student voting member on the State Board of Higher Education. And I guess I can give you a little context on how this came about. I know before I've spoke in front of you on my report about we were doing research on Measure 3 and what we could do and what our game plan was going forward, and looking through on kind of the legal ramifications, we found that we'd find it very hard pressed to find a way where it would be legal for us to take a stance that, along with Chapter 16 of the Century Code about corrupt practices and using state fees to take a stance. So we stayed away from taking any stance on any of the measures because we don't feel it's within our boundaries to do so. So the resolution, again, a resolution in support of the student voting member of the State Board of Higher Education. Whereas the North Dakota Student Association is the voice of over 48,000 students of the North Dakota University system, and whereas NDSA was created to encourage the development of leaders and participants for the community of the state of North Dakota and to stimulate an awareness of the rights and responsibilities of students in relation to the higher education system. And whereas pursuant to the bylaws in the Constitution of the state of North Dakota, currently NDSA submits 3 recommendations to the governor for his or her selection of the student member of the State Board of Higher Education. And whereas North Dakota University system is governed by the State Board of Higher Education with a voting student member as listed in the North Dakota Century Code. And whereas NDSA believes that having a voting student position in any governance system is key to ensuring that students are best represented and that the system is working in the best interest of the students. And therefore be it resolved that NDSA supports the inclusion of a voting student member on the State Board of Higher Education. And we just felt that this was something we needed to do to reaffirm that we like the position we have with our voting member on the board to be the voice of the students, and we appreciate your inclusion of our voting student member to really hear the voices of our students that we have. Because again, all of our goal here is to make it better for the students, and we realize that that is going on. And just pertaining to the resolutions that we tabled, one of them was discussing our relationship with the state board and how kind of the general discussion, again, we tabled this till after the November election is what we did, so it'll be in our November meeting. And the general discussions, we're very pleased with the steps that have been taken in the last 2 years to advance the State Board of Higher Education and the university system forward. And we feel the most confident we have in the board's leadership in the last 2 years, and we're very confident with the direction that it's going and the way that you have been evaluating yourselves. And Our next meeting is on October 24th and the 25th at Minot State University. And there we'll be further discussing our goals for the upcoming legislative session and things we want to see going forward for the students.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Thank you, Con.
Thank you.
Council of College Faculties report.
Good morning.
Good morning and welcome.
Madam President, let me allow me to read from my very brief remarks. I have, first of all, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Fernando Quijano. I am an economics professor at Dickinson State University. This is my 23rd year teaching at the SU and my 4th year in CCF and second time as president. On behalf of the Council of College Faculties, I want to first express my gratitude for letting us come before you to express our concerns and have a voice in the affairs of the university system. And the term system is the focus of my presidency this year. I think that we need to explore the idea of an increased collaboration and cohesiveness between the 11 institutions in the system. We know that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of research and teaching initiatives and events happening on our campuses every day, but it is not clear that we have an avenue for connecting faculty with their colleagues throughout the system. While other university systems have established accessible repositories of information about the expertise, research, and teaching interests of their faculty, providing a mechanism for faculty to meet other colleagues and find opportunities for collaboration, such a repository does not exist in the North Dakota university system. Faculty collaboration and expertise databases are being developed throughout the United States to foster research collaboration and to showcase the wide array of expertise and talent offered by the faculty in a system. Their publications can be added to their profiles and enhanced with information about methodologies, leadership positions, and education, giving both faculty and administrators a mechanism for finding faculties to solve a suitable problem or with whom a collaborative scholarly activity can be initiated. We, on the other hand, have had a difficult time trying to simply count the faculty in the system. For instance, last year, when we began to conceive the idea of an all-faculty conference, it was difficult for us to rapidly access the number of faculty in the system. During that process, I realized that we don't have a system-wide network of faculty, let alone knowledge of their scholarly interests. You must go to each campus website individually to try to find this information, which comes in a wide array of formats and for finding people and research and resources and events. So that is part of the theme of our all-faculty conference. This is an idea that is beginning to take hold. So the idea of an all-faculty conference. The purpose of the conference is to bring people together to embrace and enhance the idea of a university system. And of course, obviously, find opportunities for collaboration. I can attest that we have made significant progress, particularly in gathering the points of view and visions of the many constituents who would be involved in this enterprise. We presented the idea to the Chancellor last year, who graciously explained to us his vision for how a faculty conference of this sort could be funded and scheduled. And based on those parameters, the Council of College Faculties is now in the process of solidifying a program and preparing to bring the idea formally to the board. We understand that with the board's approval, this conference could become a significant event that clearly contributes to creating a more cohesive university system at the grassroots level. And those are my prepared remarks, Madam President. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This is exciting. I think this is a wonderful idea.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Board members, any comments, questions?
Just a quick one. And thank you, Fernanda, for giving your report. Could you possibly email that out too, as I'd be interested in kind of reading through some of those details again, but.
Oh, of course, yes. Yes, I would be happy to do that.
Appreciate
Yes, you bet.
Okay, thank you. Staff Senate report.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Is this working? Yes. Okay. Chair Dietrich, members of the board, I'm Emma Tufte, and I'm here on behalf of the North Dakota State Staff Senate to provide an update. We held our most recent meeting on Monday, September 29th via Ivan. I'd like to share with you some of the updates on behalf of campus senates. Many of them are preparing for the upcoming year and beginning work on annual projects, as well as discussing new initiatives and policies. At BSC, they're working on professional development opportunities and utilizing new tools for internal communication, as well as have representatives preparing for a winter celebration and employee recognition events. The CTSO developed an employee satisfaction survey at the end of July and administered that. CTSO, along with CTS and the NDUS office, have developed a subcommittee to address concerns and provide recommendations for positive change. I have no report for DCB. Dickinson State has provided thank you notes from non-appropriated funds for employees to use in an effort to promote collaboration and encouragement. They're working to streamline staff senate communications and are reviewing bylaws. Lake Region State College held an annual staff retreat in July and elected 4 new members. At Mayville, they hosted their semi-annual staff association meeting where campus updates were provided and a Q&A session was held with President Gary Hagan. They're also reviewing bylaws. Minot State coordinated the fall kickoff celebration with faculty, staff, and families, and are developing an updated cookbook with proceeds going to the Staff Senate Scholarship Endowment. NDSCS held elections this fall with new senators and officers announced at their October 1st meeting. NDSU hosted welcome back events at the Red Hawks, as well as ice cream social and popcorn event during Staff Recognition Week. UND has developed a new Staff Senate logo. They're preparing for a Denim and Diamonds event in October, working with the UND Legislative Affairs Committee to do an open forum in collaboration with faculty, staff, and students regarding Measure 3, and Senate Representative is also involved in the nickname and logo task force. At VCSU, open forums were held to share goals and hear concerns from staff. A Staff Senate website's been established, and the Senate was invited to be a part of the executive team meetings along with Faculty Senate by interim President Dr. Dahlberg. And at Williston State, they're exploring ideas, including an office crawl and other activities to foster staff and faculty relationships, as the campus has had a large amount of turnover in the past year. I wanted to reiterate that at the June meeting, I reported that 7 of the 12 senates had been invited by their presidents to have a seat at the table for campus cabinets or other administrative committees, and I'm happy to report since that last meeting, an additional senate has been invited to share their voice at the table. And in regards to policy, State Staff Senate received updates from campus representatives, and Laura Glott about the implementation of Policy 820 regarding tuition waivers that you recently passed. This is the update on behalf of State Staff Senate, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Emma. Any questions or comments? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Item number 8, and we will take a break after item number 8. So hang in there. Public comment, please. Do we have anybody today? Okay, let's take a break. Oh, sorry, yes.
Just point of reference, restrooms, main hallway, south end or north end, either way.
Okay. Okay. We'll reconvene at 15 minutes past the hour. Okay. We will call the meeting back to order. We are moving on to board business. We have item number 9. And it says approve, but I'd like to say dash discuss strategic plan. Connie?
Thank you.
Connie, can I start?
My microphone is live. I'm going to turn it over to Chancellor Skogan first to make some comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Today is a momentous day for the board. Before you now for your consideration is a new strategic plan. Connie, Linda, and Lisa are going to walk you through the plan, and we're all here to answer any questions you have. A board strategic plan is important for 2 reasons. First, for accreditation purposes for your institutions, the Higher Learning Commission requires a strategic plan. As you'll remember from the HLC Advisory Team report, the lack of a current strategic plan for our system was addressed as a concern. Quote, the team concludes that NDUS does not now have a plan in place against which to evaluate performance. System-wide measures of effectiveness are collected and published, but do not appear to be used by the board to make decisions. The current administration has begun a significant effort to correct the situation. They have only begun, however, and have not produced either an intact plan or accompanying measures, unquote. Today, we hope to remedy that. Secondly, a strategic plan provides your institutions and our stakeholders from across the state a vision and roadmap for the future of higher education in North Dakota. But the strategic plan is really a beginning to the future, not an end product. Upon your approval of this plan, 3 things will subsequently happen. The first involves this board directly, and that is to have substantive discussions about the topics within this plan so you can appropriately monitor your institution's progress in meeting the key indicators. If indicators are not being met, this board must decide what adjustments should be made to put your institutions into a better position to meet those indicators, or whether even the right indicators are being used. This is all part of the feedback mechanism that, in the words of the HLC report, will ensure continued performance improvement and that allows an institution to learn from its experience. As we move forward, the board has to be actively involved in that process. Secondly, Board Policy 303.2 requiring an NDUS strategic plan charges the institutions with developing strategic plans that, while defining institutional priorities, shall be aligned with the NDUS strategic plan and state board policies. Thus, once your strategic plan is approved, I'll be working with your presidents on the next step of alignment plans from your institutions. Finally, your system office has never had its own plan to align itself with the NDUS strategic plan. Upon approval of your plan, we'll begin those activities in our office as well. Thus, today's anticipated approval of a new strategic plan is but the very first step in our journey into the future of higher education for our great state. And now I'll turn it over to Con.
Thank you, Dr. Skogan. And I am going to, if we can move to the next slide, this is just a reminder of where we have been in this very long path toward a new strategic plan. We are going to begin with a video from the planning day on July 31st that will remind all of us of just how far we've come.
Down the road, what we're doing today really sets the foundation, sets the framework, the roadmap, if you will, for the university system moving forward, which means for our students additional opportunities, new possibilities that are going to be there for our students today, tomorrow, and into the future.
What are the partners with higher education saying and asking? What are the students thinking? What do the faculty and staff think? And all of that came into the theme development. But students are front and center, and I think that is just awesome.
Now, I know many of you are doing this very well, and I think it needs to continue, is continue to build partnerships with business and industry, whether it's your department chairs or the presidents yourself. More partnerships, more advisory groups need to be created because they will be able to come to you and say, okay, we want to do this. We want to expand our facility. These are the kinds of people we need. Can you build an education or a training program around this?
They bring their families and they can be attracted to the universities for culture.
Well, what inspires me is that we're having so much conversation. It's just wonderful to be able to think about the future of the state of North Dakota and how higher education plays into that, and to have all the major players around the table, the State Board of Higher Ed and the presidents and the senior staff of the university system and some senior staff from some of the institutions, and just having a conversation has been really inspiring.
I'm really focused on the system and what makes the system better for everybody in the state, because that's what this is all about, is education and providing the future generations with something that's not here now.
This is North Dakota's moment. We can do it now. If we couldn't do it at any other time in our history, this is our moment.
The biggest advantage for students will be greater access to education, greater opportunities in regard to all the wealth that has come into this community, and probably just a renewed excitement about what we're doing in the university system.
And making sure that throughout all of our decisions, we're asking, what about the students? What are their needs? And how can we best meet those needs?
We need the unconditional backing of the Higher Ed Board. Don't pull back. Allow us to continue on a path of improvement. We will prove ourselves worthy. Then stand back and watch us impress the world.
When we selected the mission statement, Unleashing Potential, the group was excited. Some even said, kind of gave them goosebumps, the thought of kind of what that empowers us to do as a system.
Everyone knows we're about education, so we don't really need to say knowledge and skills, inspiring our future.
By unleashing potential, we're unleashing the potential of our presidents. We're not actually the educators. We're unleashing the potential of our institutions.
We're seeing unprecedented growth in population, in our economy, and the opportunities right now are endless. And we're going to work together to take advantage of those and do the best we can for our residents in our state.
So congratulations to the nearly 2,000 people across the state of North Dakota that had some form of input into your new 5-year plan. Let me emphasize, this is a draft plan, but I think that video captures the energy and enthusiasm that everyone present on July 31st exhibited. The passion for our students was very apparent. And I think everyone should be congratulated for setting our feet on a wonderful path for the next 5 years. Let me again emphasize, this is a draft plan, and what you have at your workstations is a report, a 10-page report to the board. We're calling this new 5-year plan a framework for transformational change because, as Chancellor Skogan and Dr. Diedrichs have already noted, this is just the beginning. This is no end. And so what I would invite you to do today is to join the staff members, the presidents, everyone else that has had input into establishing the strategies that will allow us to accomplish the goals that we talked about on July 31st. We're going to walk through those. We are going to look at the outcomes. We have to be able to measure our progress, and it's not the old joke about pounding a stake behind you to make sure that you're actually moving forward. What we are offering to you today is the collective wisdom. The presidents have gone through all of these. We've had a tremendous amount of staff assistance in putting together those strategies and the outcomes. We are going to have a little bit of interaction to walk you through this plan. In many cases, you've heard us talk about the dashboards. We have draft dashboards to show you. And so we will be working through this. This is your time to discuss and ask questions. I am going to be happy to defer the hard questions to the various experts in the room who can probably answer them better than I if we get into a spot where you need some technical expertise. So Lisa and Linda are my partners in crime here. We're going to work through this. If you are ready to begin. The report, let me just say that in terms of this paper report, and there are other copies in the room, the first 3 pages are the narrative that summarize the process leading up to our planning event, where we selected the 4 areas of priority and the 4 goals. And the heart of the plan really begins on page 4. It's pages 4 through 7. And then the back several pages are also important, but we can talk about those in a little bit. Lisa, if we can go to the
dashboard.
No, we're going to go with going
You've
to.
got a clicker
I've
if
got
you
it.
want to go ahead.
Now, let's see if I can manage to break the technology. Oh, I'm going backwards. Sorry. So on the 31st, you selected affordability, access, availability, excellence in education, and the unified system as your 4 priority areas. I should also note that this plan certainly is not a standalone piece. It stands on the shoulders of all of the previous planning efforts and all of the great and hard work the universities and colleges have done to get us to the point we are today. You selected 4 goals in those areas. So the first one we characterized as delivered degrees that are the best value in the nation. Under access and availability, provide programs people want where and when they need them. Excellence in education, we said ensure student success. And then under the unified system, we recognize that there is a benefit to the 11 campus system, and you have a desire to maximize those strengths. Here's where we're going to get into the strategies. So if we're going to deliver the degrees that are the best value in the nation, I will tell you that we probably looked at 40 or 50 strategies and metrics or outcomes, and ended up with the ones that seemed to make the best sense, that provided that accountability and transparency, and that were measurable, most importantly, measurable. So if any board member has a comment or a question, these are the 4 strategies under degrees that are the best value in the nation. In just a minute, we'll get into the dashboards to show you how we might measure that. So first is the cost to attend, both clearly stated and regionally competitive. Standardizing the categories of mandatory fees, increasing open educational resources, and then rank among most productive states in total funding per degree and certificate. And here are the indicators. We have, under the tuition model, an easy to understand tuition model, you have been presented the task force recommendations. And now under 1.1b, the key indicator being the affordability of tuition and fees for North Dakota families, this is the first place where we want to show you a dashboard that demonstrates that to us and to the world. Here are your 4 goals that I just reviewed. And if we can go to goal number 1. And let's go to 1, there we go. Lisa has a microphone, and so she's going to talk you through the demo.
Because of the screen resolution, you won't see, you'll see a little bit of scrolling, but if you had these on your laptop, it would look much better. So we're looking at tuition and fees that are at or below the regional average. And so you see we have the 3 categories. the research, the 4-year regional, and the 2-year. And then we have the multiple years. So right now what's showing is 2013 and 14. And then the dotted lines here are the regional averages. And the reason there are 2 on this one, let's see if I can mouse over this. One is the master's average and one is the regional average. So that's why there are 2 on that particular dashboard.
And so Lisa, if you can hang on that one just a minute. As you all have noted, our tuition and fees are below the regional average, with the exception of the 2-year community colleges.
And then I can scroll to the previous year and the previous year. So going back to 2009, 10. And these are just a sample of what we can do with the dashboards and the data.
If I might interject here, please. So what we're looking at now, this will be on the web. And so at any time, you can go into any one of the goals and you can jump on the web and you can take a look and see where we are. Now, obviously, this one is rather static because at the end of each year, then the tuition and fees will be identified and then we'll get the regional averages. But at any rate, this will change each time. And so the ones we're showing you, they're accessible to you as board members to measure the progress of your institutions on these particular goals. And they're also going to be available to any other stakeholder in the state. They can go on the website and they can see where we are on those goals.
Is it possible that we can add a little additional dynamic information, for instance, for parents who might be forward-looking and say predicted fee and tuitions for the next year? And then also a huge part of affordability is housing and meals. And that's not on here. Are we going to put that component in? Because certainly, I mean, I know it's about $9,000 for one of our children just for the housing component.
There's already on the website, Dr. Murphy, there's already a cost calculator for all of your institutions.
Okay.
That's already on
And
the
is that
website.
forward-looking, do you know?
No. And I don't know how you would do it forward-looking. It's a cost calculator that tells you right now if you went to UND what it would cost you,
Okay.
if you went to Lake Region what it would cost, and that does calculate all of that. That's been on the website for a few years now.
I might add for the benefit of the board, all of the work that's gone into the strategies and the outcomes. We have worked with the presidents and with the staff to make sure that we are not going to create an unbelievable burden in terms of some information that we think might be nice to have, but we don't collect it and it's going to be very complicated. I will tell you that we're still working through those conversations. So if you have any concerns or suggestions, we will make note of them and we will check them out and see what we need to do next.
I can't remember what the discussion, and maybe there hasn't been a lot of discussion on how we bring the 2-year community college fees in line with the objective.
Right. Yeah. Sir, the legislature has had many discussions on this. Not this biennium, but the 2 previous biennia, the legislature actually bought the student costs to go to the 2-year colleges. So 6 years ago, we started at 21% above regional averages. Right now, we're at about 8% above regional averages at our 2-year schools. In Dr. Sanford's committee, the Interim Committee on Higher Ed Funding, they have a lot of interest in doing that again, and so in effect freezing the tuition at the 2-year schools. Now the budget recommendation that you all passed and that we forwarded to the governor was to freeze tuition at all of the schools. And of course we don't know whether the governor is going to buy that or whether the legislature is going to buy that, but I have sensed a very strong appetite for freezing the tuition at the 2-year schools.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions about these now understand that we're showing you the metrics, or the strategies and the measurements by way of the dashboard, but we don't want you to think that that doesn't mean we don't want to hear your thoughts about it, so please.
So one comment I would have is when I thought Eric was going to say, actually, when you talk about value, there's two components. There's the cost component, there's also the benefit component. And, by focusing strictly on the cost, which is what we appear to be doing, I go back to the concern I've stated before, which is that, we're aiming to be the low-cost provider. And I just want to be careful that we focus on more than just the cost, and we look at the value that our students are receiving. I know there's all kinds of calculators out there. I mean, you see it, best value institution, because when these people graduate, I mean, their starting salaries, their starting wages are pretty significant. And I guess I'd like to see us, take that into account as well, as we look at the value of what students are receiving.
Thank you. Other questions, comments?
Yeah. And this is a general comment too throughout the strategic plan. I guess referring to the outcomes, like usually the outcomes are more so specific rewording of the key indicator without mentioning like a specific like numeric goal, for example. And, I mean, the way how it's structured right now, as long as we're making even the most minimal accomplishment of achieving that outcome, we've achieved that outcome. And I'm wondering if that's the direction we want to take, whether we want to, for example, attach certain benchmarks to these down the road.
Perfect question. That actually was going to be at the back half of my comments to the board, but I think it's a good question we should address up front. As the Chancellor pointed out in his introductory comments, this is just the start. And what will need to happen next for this to be a living document, there are at least 3 pieces that are missing. One is the board's conversation, and perhaps the board's continuing conversation about, for example, on pages 8 and 9, you see a number of bulleted items where either we couldn't figure out how to make a measurable outcome out of that, but still important ideas that were running through the entirety of the staff and faculty survey or the business community interviews or wherever they came from. But this is the framework for transformational change. The real work happens at the campus level. The campuses will need to develop their campus initiatives that align with your broadly stated goals and the objectives, if you like what we all have come up with. But those campus initiatives are absolutely key. The president's goals will be incorporated in that. So the board has a continuing conversation. The campuses have their own conversation about what initiatives they will select to forward this agenda. And then the system office, as Chancellor Skogan indicated, has to have a conversation about how we support both the board and the institutions in their portions of that plan and that conversation.
Thank you.
And if I'd like to add on to that too about the numbers and the target, having a numerical target. One of the issues that you struggle with as a board, having 11 very different institutions, is that in any one of these conversations, a numerical target is not, you're not going to find a one-size-fits-all. And so I think the alignment plans are really important in discussions on alignment plans as to, when we start having discussions about numerical targets. Because, a 5% of X means one thing to Lake Region State College or Bottineau, and it means another thing to UND or NDSU. And so what we tried to do is avoid ending up with something that just trying to create a one-size-fits-all, and then the alignment plans will be addressing those.
Thank you.
Any other comments on those 3 key indicators, the measurements? Before we move on to, let's try 1.2, which is the mandatory fees and policies related to those fees. We're not going to demo the outcome at this point. Does anyone have any questions about that one? Again, those key indicators are what we will measure and report to you and the rest of the world Then let's look at 1.3, which is the use of open educational resources. This is a very hot topic in many, many arenas. And so the key indicator here is faculty use of open educational resources. We do not have baseline data on that. We have a draft survey for faculty, but we have not asked faculty to fill that out because we want to know, first of all, that you want this included in the plan. And so there's where we attempted to put a number, but I will tell you that we attempted to put numbers all over the place, and it just, as the chancellor said, it just doesn't work with 11 unique institutions. And really, they will be happy to tell us how they'll do it and what they can do.
Connie, when do you expect that survey to go out? Because I think that'll be really important.
Not until after the board takes action on this plan. I would think that we could probably put it out somewhere in the next several weeks, but we also wanted to make sure that we weren't asking faculty to fill out multiple surveys. So after your conversation today, we'll have a better idea of what else may need to be on that survey.
But just for a point of information for the board, we heard from Fernando discussing the conference that we're planning for May, and a session on open resources is part of that conference. And so CCF has embraced this, although we have a strong statement regarding the fact that the use of sources for any class is really up to the faculty member that's delivering that curriculum. But we embrace the idea that if we can offer other alternatives, and my class we're doing exactly that, we're allowing students to go to a national resource at NIH to get a textbook. That's the top of the line textbook in the field. So there are lots of ways we can do this, and there's a lot of resources out there. Some are better than others. But I think overall the faculty support this, but we also think it's important to keep the spirit in mind of remember who's the keeper of the curriculum.
And please assure your colleagues that in all of the conversations about this topic, that has been clearly recognized.
I have done so multiple times.
So Connie, a quick question. You brought up that this is the first step and then it's the institutional initiatives that come in and that it won't be a one-fits-all. Will we have say on whether or not we think their initiative is adequate to fill these goals? If they say they're going to increase something by 1%, 2%, 3%, if we don't think that's high enough, will that be the chancellor's?
I would bring the institutional alignment plans back to the board.
Okay.
That would be my assumption, but I am not in charge of that.
Connie.
Sir.
Just as an example, so now the 15% figure on this particular outcome, that comes from where?
That comes from pixie dust. Honestly, I don't mean to be facetious. Literally, there have been multiple conversations about it. The point is that we don't know what the baseline is.
Right.
And so I'm assuming we're not going to enshrine, I mean, we might, if the survey comes back and we find out we have 2 instructors in the entirety of the system who are using 100% open educational resources, then that means 15% is a pretty low bar over the next 5 years. And this is one that will need to have further conversation.
Right. And I raised the question, and it's probably the appropriate time to talk about it. I've had a number of lengthy conversations with the chancellor and the board president just on mechanics of this. And I want to say from the onset, they've been very accommodating with my concerns on this, and there's even some changes that took place in the draft. But what I just want to make sure, again, this isn't a negative comment on the strategic plan. I'm just trying to get my mind around the mechanics. So we as a board need to be mindful that if we pass this as a strategic plan, for instance, just using this particular slide, we need to be careful that we haven't passed a strategic plan that contains pixie dust on this particular item.
Sure.
And so I think what the chancellor said early on needs, at least at the end of this discussion, to be somehow formalized, that we we acknowledge that we have a framework of a strategic plan here that really goes, whatever percentage you want to say, 90% of the way to where we need to be. But we do have certain outcomes or indicators that A, we don't know yet, B, perhaps the board hasn't had a chance. You know, you might come back and say, well, we really think it's 20. But as a board, I still think strongly that that is something that once that information is there, that has to bubble up to our level to say, should it be 10, 15, or 20? And that's kind of a common theme throughout that. I had zeroed in a little bit more when we got to admission standards, and we'll have a little bit of talk about that. And I think I'm following through discussions with the Chancellor and the President how this is going to work mechanically. But I just want to be careful as board members, because if we adopt this at the end, we've essentially adopted a strategic plan, and we want to make sure that we haven't either locked ourselves into something that we didn't intend to, or that we at least kept the door open for us to have further review of some of these areas. So as we walk through, I just want everybody to, and this was just a good example of that, but you'll see throughout there's this similar question. Thank you.
And thank you for that, because I actually considered striking everything after faculty use, but left it in so that you could have that kind of discussion, and we could remember to bookmark this issue, that we have 11 distinct institutions, and we need their help in telling all of us how we're going to achieve these, but that we do expect everything to be measurable. And so if you're comfortable, we will just right now agree to strike everything after faculty use, because it will need to be established later. We do not have any baseline data on this. But it's a great comment about process as well as content. And if you are ready, this is 1.4, which is degrees awarded per $100,000 of appropriation. And please know that this is information that we have been collecting for quite some time. We're not, in the interest of getting you into more of the fascinating dashboards so you can see how it's going to work. If you don't mind, I would like to step into 2.0, which is the goal about providing programs people want, where and when they need them. And these are the three key indicators. These are the three strategies, and then we'll get into the key indicators. So programs that are relevant, valuable, and timely, meeting North Dakota's workforce needs through recruitment of students. Now 2.2, you need to know, has had a lot of conversation, because we're talking about bold efforts to recruit students from both traditional and non-traditional audiences, both in and out of state. And then we've also talked about the need to expand access to instructional opportunities. That was 2.3 is one area where the business community spoke very clearly. So let's look at the key indicators. On programs that are relevant, valuable, and timely, the 2.1A, we're going to demo A, B, and C so that you can drill down into those. So degrees awarded at all levels, degrees at levels that are considered areas of greatest need, and then businesses receiving Train ND training. So Lisa, if we can toggle to the dashboards on A, B, and C. And will you walk us through
Okay, so 2.1, our programs are relevant, valuable, and timely. And 2.1A is the number of degrees awarded. And you can see this is as it rolls up to a system. So our system-wide number of degrees for those calendars or school years. And then I can drill down by clicking on any of these. And then you can see them broken out by categories.
That would be the total number of degrees awarded.
Will it divide this out via professional and other degree programs? And what about certificate programs? Certainly, a lot of institutions have even UND has a lot of certificate programs that are really critical across the state, especially in the healthcare. And, will that be listed on here? Because total degrees from UND and NDSU doesn't take into account how many doctorates in pharmacy do we have, how many doctorates in physical therapy, how many occupational therapists, so forth, so on, which I also think are critical in meeting the perceived healthcare needs of the state. And so will we start seeing that, and including lawyers and everything else? How are we going to break that down there?
We can, Dr. Murphy, construct dashboards for any data set. And so if the collective wisdom is that we need to drill down even further on these, please let us know, because we can do it. We just need to know how deeply you want to go. We've had some discussions about the information that is live on the web for everyone, and that probably is interesting to a great number of people. And then there's the drill down piece, and we don't know how to answer that question right now.
And I'm not necessarily talking about every single opportunity there, but certainly professional degrees versus graduate degrees, master's versus PhD might perhaps be useful. And especially since this is available, it gives an idea to a potential out-of-state student especially who might be looking at professional graduate opportunities at the two research institutions. May give that student a greater sense of satisfaction for moving towards the direction of application and then ultimately acceptance and coming. So I'm just curious about, and it's a big question. How deep do you go? I understand that, but
we do have later, you'll see under 4.0, maximizing the strengths of the unified system, you will see under 4.4, the presidents of the two research universities offered measurements, and the 4.4D is doctoral conferrals. There may be some information back there that we can look at.
Okay, thank you.
Let's remember that question.
Okay.
Lisa? Are we ready for two? Does anyone have any other questions on? So we have degrees at all levels, and then we have areas of greatest need, and then we have, the third one is the businesses receiving training.
And can you just tell me where greatest need is defined, or what we're saying that?
And this is just baseline data this year we decided to use, and then I'll have Connie answer.
We have baseline data, and so we're including those reflected in loan forgiveness programs, but we have multiple sources of information about areas of need. And one source you've already seen, and that is the burning glass analysis that's at the front end of your facilities master plan that you looked at back in May or June. We also consulted with Job Service North Dakota, but that loan forgiveness piece, of course, is the legislatively appropriated loan forgiveness program.
Chairman, how have you been working with the state demographer? They were brought into our, when we're talking about needs, they were brought into our discussion at the retreat back in July. Are you, since you're working on baselines now, is that used at that point to build this? And also, where is that going to be used forward thinking with this plan and what the state needs?
Absolutely. The paragraph that you have on the first page of your report, it is the first paragraph and the third paragraph were specifically reviewed by our partners at the state, Kevin Iverson primarily. Yesterday, I visited with Al Anderson, who heads up the Department of Commerce, and he had gone through this and had some comments, some suggestions, and Andy Peterson, who's the president of the Greater North Dakota Chamber. So we have been working in tandem with our state
Do you
partners.
see that as an ongoing relationship?
Yes, ma'am, we do, absolutely.
I mean, to me, it's such a valuable tool. It was eye-opening to me when I saw some of the work that had been done. So I would like to think that we would keep this, like you say, this is a living, breathing document here that has to continue to grow as our workforce does.
Well, and I would, with that, I think it is a moving target, and so it's a little hard to build something around it because, what is the greatest need? Well, I have my opinion on that right now. I mean, we're trying to hire programmers, right? But someone else may have a different opinion on what that means. And if we look at these numbers, I mean, job service numbers versus the projections versus, we're kind of creating a moving target. And so it'd be nice to define that a little bit better.
I think we have to, because that's what's going to help our colleges to know. I mean, I know at Bismarck State, I know, everybody has their little things that they're interested in. UND's, the petroleum department. I mean, what a huge success that is, but it's designed specifically to a need here in North Dakota. I'd just like to think that we would continue to keep that discussion open so we keep working in the right direction.
So this is probably a place where a drill down would be helpful.
I think so.
A drill down. We will note that and work on that. And I think your discussion is on target. This is one area, as has been noted numerous times, we are in a stage of unprecedented growth and opportunity in this state. And we need to know that even though there's a North Dakota state law requirement for a 5-year plan, this has to be a living, breathing document. And you may have a discussion annually about that very item. Because you're right, that is the job of higher education. Although I want to note for all my friends in the humanities across the state, the business community was very clear that the state has not lost its need for 4-year degrees and beyond. It's not just about workforce training. It's not just about certificate or 2-year programs. It's everything.
That's not so.
Just a quick comment, just kind of going off that, I think the board has identified like more than one possible need. So for the outcome, it might be best for now to put state greatest needs as opposed to just identifying a single need. This is under 2.1C, the outcome on page
2.1C, so
yeah, you have state's greatest need, singular, as the outcome.
oh, need on the. I'm sorry, I'm looking at my PowerPoint and it says needs plural.
Well, under outcome, I mean, it says increased number of degrees awarded in areas of state's greatest need.
Yeah.
Needs plural.
Yeah, we need, typo.
Yes.
We'll fix it.
Sure.
I need to go back to slides.
Sure. 2 slides back.
Oh.
2.
You mean dashboards or slides?
Dashboards.
So you wanted degrees awarded? No? It showed all of it, huh? Okay. Okay.
So now this one is just total number. This is not really a drill down. It's by institution, but it's total number. And I've noted the question about degrees and certificates. 2.1B is the areas of greatest need. 2.1C is the workforce training, Train ND training. So I think, Lisa, you were going to show.
Right, so 2.1C on the right, and this one is not a drillable dashboard, but rather we can move, this is the NDUS average. So it's the number of businesses trained and then the percent of businesses trained. But then if I click the little indicator over, I can go by Train ND region. So as you can see, the Train ND, in this case, BSC region is 4% of the businesses trained, and the number is 257. And we can go to Lake Region, and our region that we're in today. And the Williston region.
Know that we worked with the Train ND folks on this particular metric. Originally, we had 3 because they track 3 for their own purposes. And when we had the conversation with the presidents, everyone agreed that this would be a proper way to state this and measure. Any other questions on 2.1A, B, or C? Then shall we move to 2.2?
There you go. I moved it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Here we go. So this is our recruitment of students. And here we're looking at the proportion of North Dakota high school graduates attending one of our institutions. And we're looking at non-resident students because we have such tremendous workforce need. I think you might remember when the state demographer told us on July 31st that we have wrung every ounce of productivity out of our current workforce. Everyone who can be employed is employed, and we need more people. And so 2.2B speaks specifically to that, and then 2.2C is a piece from the Lumina Foundation report. And when I met with Al Anderson and Andy Peterson yesterday, they gave me a hot off the press copy of North Dakota 2020 and Beyond report. And we won't spend a whole lot of time there, but they do also mention the Lumina Foundation goals for North Dakota. And it appears front and center. I think it's on page 3 of their report. But I believe what Lisa's going to show us is A and B. So 2.2, there we go. So A is the proportion of our graduates coming to our institutions.
Right, so this is North Dakota public high school graduates going to our public NDUS institutions. And you can see our percentage is declining. So if we look at 2009 to 10, we're at 58%. The following year, 56, 55, and now 51.
And aren't we all curious about why that is? You know, what part of the board's continuing conversation, I think, about this plan, if that's an area of interest for you, then put that on an agenda and say, you know, tell us more about that.
And this is the proportion. It isn't the number, because obviously our high school, we have a lull and we have a decline in high school population right now, but it will come back up. So we've taken that into account, and this is the proportion.
Any questions about that or about non-resident students?
If I can interject at this point, Dr. DiLorenzo gave us an excellent presentation this morning on PAR. And this is one of the things, you know, this is really curious, and I had no idea about this until they were putting this dashboard together, and all of a sudden we see, wow, in 2009, how many of our students were coming to our institutions, and then it dropped and it dropped. And once you can drill down into the data, like Dr. DiLorenzo was talking about today, eventually you can answer that question. What is it that we have to do to get more of our students going to our institutions? And, you know, the answer might be as simple as the fact that they're getting really good jobs straight out of high school. You know, it might be a matter of our economy, or it might be something else. We don't know that. until we have the data and we can drill down into that, and we can collect that data when freshmen come to schools and stuff like that. So that's another thing that PAR, as we have dashboards and we see trends, and you see trends as you're going along, and you see trends that are worrisome to you, or you see trends you want to change the speed at which they're improving or whatever, then PAR will help us answer those questions.
Well, just to comment on this point, this is calculated for total student body, correct?
For the public schools.
Right. Not for students who have chosen to go to a post-secondary educational opportunity. In other words, we're not looking at students, we have 100,000 students, 90,000 decide to go to the university or to a two-year school or whatever for education. We're not looking at that. We're looking at the total number of students that ultimately go on to, who attend NDUS. It doesn't say they're attending somewhere else.
That's correct.
Right.
And so I think again, that's a problem with this because we have a robust economy, we have other jobs. You know, I can get a CDL and go out and make 80 or 90,000 in the oil patch. Maybe I want to do that for 2 to 3 years so I can go to college or university. So, I just, it's problematic in trying to make decisions because we don't know if we're not reaching students who want to go to college and are going elsewhere, or it's an effect of the economy. I think that's important to try to figure that out. So are we losing the number of students that are going off to college or university or two-year school, whatever, how many of those are we having in the system versus the historical trend on that?
This really is the bite of the pie metric. It's how many of our public high school graduates are coming to one of our institutions. And where else they're going, that's not what we're showing you. We're just showing you the bite of the pie. But I do think that this is a great area for further discussion.
And Dr. Murphy, just as an FYI, we weren't able to answer this question until this year.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, that's the point of the data. We're now just getting that data combined with K-12 so we can answer these various questions. We never knew this particular slice before.
And I don't think that it's not a negative towards the plan. It's just an idea of if we're going to make decisions, if there's populations we're not reaching and they're going elsewhere, to ask the question, why are those students going elsewhere? You can't become better if you don't understand why something may be occurring.
I could not agree with you more. In a number of cases, Dr. Murphy, I have said to myself, we need market research here. We really need to know our audience better. But as Dr. Feldner pointed out, we're just now getting this baseline data, so we're thrilled with that. Any other questions on?
I think on the flip side of that, the amount of non-resident students has increased. And what are the reasons why, and how can we make that grow? Because that's an integral part of the growth of our system. And so that's a positive part of seeing the dashboard and looking at it.
Oh, my drill went away. This one drilled down yesterday. So we could have broken it out for you by campus, but I don't know.
What is the percentage across the country for various states on the amount of adults having an associate degree? And where does North Dakota rate? Do we rate towards the higher end, towards the lower end?
We rate pretty well.
We do? Okay.
We do. On degree attainment overall, North Dakota ranks only behind Massachusetts.
Oh, wow, good.
So we rank very well.
And we know that according to the American Community Survey, that we have 24% of our adult population in state with some college, no degree. So that's another part of that non-traditional audience conversation that you may want to have in the future.
Well, and kind of to, in line with what you were just saying, Kevin, one of the questions I had in looking at this is, what are we comparing ourselves against? Is it our prior performance, or is it other states and benchmarking? Because I know that there's, for at least for these strategies, there's, I think one of them has a number, but otherwise it's just increase. And does that mean 1%? Does that mean one person? I don't know. It seems like there should be a metric tied around that. And I don't know if there are plans to do that. But in terms of being measurable, if we just follow the trend, we'll meet it, right? But are we setting a goal for ourselves? And is it against other states or the region, or is it against our prior performance?
And that is the campus initiatives discussion.
The drill came back. There we go.
The drill came back? Oh,
Yes.
good.
So this drilled down into your non-resident enrollments. And right now it's on 2014. And we've got data for fall of 2013 and 2012.
Looks like Minot gets the award.
Minot is doing very well. And in fact, when I was on the Minot campus interviewing the president, his cabinet, the staff and students and faculty, they were very proud of that. All right, shall we go on to, so that was 2.2, recruitment. And if we can go back to the PowerPoint, we're not going to demo 2.3. I think it's the next slide. One more, there we go. So this one is the instructional opportunities through non-traditional delivery. And we're suggesting that the indicator under 2.3A will be the number of degree and certificate program offerings through non-traditional. And then also measuring the students participating in courses, because it doesn't do any good to offer the degree or certificate program if we don't have students using those non-traditional delivery methods. And so we would look at both. We do not have a demo for you. Any questions about those two measurements?
Well, I know that just the that transitioning into this non-traditional delivery method can be a process for a lot of the campuses too. So sort of some guidance in terms of what's expected, especially in participating in regards to what is expected out of the participation. Because I know when I took online classes, for the most part, you signed up to Blackboard, you took your exams, and you read your documents. And that's all that was really expected. So is that sort of the benchmark for participation, or is more going to be required, and how do you integrate that into policy and make sure you're enforcing that properly?
Excellent points about that future conversation. Let's move on to 3.0. Remember that we had a very robust discussion on the 31st about whether we should say ensure student success, and we came down on the side of being very clear and positive that ensure student success is an important goal. And so here's where we get into admission standards and attainment rates. There was a great deal of discussion about all of this in the pathways discussion, and so you will see a number of those elements incorporated into this plan. Remember that I said this plan stands on the shoulder of all plans previous, and I think you'll see a lot of that right now. 3.3 is barriers to registering and advising transfer students. So here we are, Mr. Shaft.
Connie, this comes back to this mechanics question that I talked earlier about, and I do think this is one area as a board that we're going to have to clearly decide how this works. And what I'm getting at is we did adopt, getting to be now a couple of years ago, the Pathways Initiative, and to a certain degree, some of that has been implemented already. And then there's these other large areas that we've backed off and sent them back to the campuses, and we've had task force reports coming back to us. So we have this initiative that's alive out there, and parts of that initiative, I want to be corrected if I'm wrong, but parts of that initiative are now being plugged into the strategic plan, but not all of it, as I understand. And
I think at some level, everything that was in Pathways is addressed somehow in.
Okay,
yes.
That's what I want to figure out.
Okay, but just so we're clear on this, what is different on this particular one, and because this is a big one.
Yeah.
What is different on this particular one is that there was a algorithm that was in Pathways.
Right.
And we had a task force, over many months that came up with a different algorithm, if you will, for admissions.
Right.
You asked me to get outside consultant. We had Noel Levitz evaluated that, and you've all gotten that report. And so the decision is then, okay, are we accepting that the standards from the full implementation of the standards from that report from that task force?
Well, and that's,
so
that's my mechanics question, because if I'm just looking at this document, just the document itself, I haven't seen anything where we've decided to repeal the earlier algorithm, which I think we probably are, but I don't see where we've actually done that, nor do I see anything where we've actually adopted the task force report. And then just to be really clear, and this goes back to my earlier comment where I would like the board to still be able to have these discussions, because I was, for one that did not accept the task force report, nor the Noel Levitz. But we haven't ever had that discussion, and there's probably board members who fully accepted it, but we haven't really come to a board decision on that. And something as big as admission standards, I think we need to. So I mean, as this reads, I think it reads okay, but I do think that we need to have a real clear understanding. When we adopt this plan, is Pathways fully implemented in this plan so that that initiative now is moving forward through the strategic plan? And I think that's our intention, but I don't know if we've actually mechanically done that. And then two, some of these areas that do require some board deliberation, and obviously something as important as admission standards, I certainly think would need some board deliberation, that we still have that opportunity. And so I'm looking at Connie to say, does that work in here?
Mr. Shaft, it certainly can work. First of all, let me point out that we have an error on this is not quite properly stated. It should be new admission standards for full-time, first-time college freshmen, fall 2016, with full implementation by fall 2018. So we will make that correction. So this is the full-time, first-time college freshman, fall 2016. In response to your question about the mechanics, perhaps the board may want to have a conversation. I went back through the board's strategic planning processes all the way back to 1997. I did not read through the minutes of every meeting of the Board of Higher Education, but in what I reviewed, I did not find a place where the board said, now we're divorcing from this. It looks to me like the assumption is every new 5-year plan builds on the past. And so I'm not sure that it's a matter of taking specific board action, but you're the board, you tell me if I'm wrong. What typically one would expect to see with a new 5-year plan is that it incorporates the best of everything that's gone on before, and it moves forward for the next 5 years.
And I agree, and I think the only thing is that we just want to be clear that we do our housekeeping so that we don't have two processes moving along parallel to each other. Now, the other thing, which is more of a cosmetic thing, but you'll see on your handout that parentheses Pathways Access Initiative has been added. That's been added with my discussions with the Chancellor and the President, because I think it's important. We've invested a lot of time and energy and a lot of name attachment to the Pathways process, and I think it's important for us to formally in the strategic plan acknowledge that we're not abandoning the Pathways, but we have transitioned it into this, and at least in my view that's very helpful to have, because I'm able to look then and say, okay, this is where we're carrying that forward in this strategic plan. So
the email that I received with the updated admission guideline recommendations, those are the ones that are in the...
That's what you see on the screen.
That's the dashboard version is right there.
Okay.
And that is what I had emailed out.
And those have been approved, or do we need a...
No, we're asking you today, collectively, all of this will be a motion to approve this as, to move us forward, right?
So with that though, Larry, again, when I'm looking at what we're approving, I still don't see where it says under 3.1A, I don't see anywhere where it says we're adopting the task force recommendation. So I'm opposed to adopting it, but obviously there's some people who might be in favor of it, but, well, I misspoke. Parts of it I'm opposed to, but I don't see where we've done that or where we are doing that. And I don't know if it has to be done today.
I think the adoption of the plan today, if you adopt the plan today, then you're adopting all of those elements to it. And that we've identified as for the task force, or in this case, this was, I think our conversations were last week about the ACT change for UND and NDSU, and all of that is incorporated into this current discussion.
So hypothetically, and I'm in agreement with some of the accommodations that were made regarding the research schools, but there's a component in here, just for discussion's sake, about students that fall outside of the admission requirements, and there's a window where the campuses would have the ability to review these students on a case-by-case basis. And I'm not arguing for or against that, I'm just saying now that is something that has never come before the board. We have a task force that reported a recommendation, but I still think that that's something, at least as a board member, we should have the opportunity to have a face-to-face discussion. And we should have an opportunity to have a face-to-face discussion to see if Mr. Jelmstead agrees with the ACT scores and great GPAs out in the Minot area versus in Mr. Morton. And we've just not had that. And I'm a little concerned. I don't have an issue at all with the broad stroke here. But I still think that on some of those areas, we as a board have to be able to have a discussion on what, I mean, this component under 3 is arguably the biggest thing any of you will do as board members. And we're down to about a half hour. And so I'm uncomfortable with that. And I'm just wondering, is there a way that we can accommodate the need to get this plan passed out so that we have it by the end of the month for HLC, but still leave the board with the ability to say, we want to revisit a task force to make sure that we're really right on this. And I guess that's what I'm asking is, at least from my perspective, I think we need to do that, and I'm wondering how.
Let me just, I think from a mechanics standpoint, I think Grant raises a good point. I think from a mechanics standpoint, it's not only important that we appear to be in control, but we maybe should actually be in control. Is that? But if you go back, I think we're all committed to pathways. We did decide to appoint a task force to look at admission standards, and it looks like the algorithm has been changed. So we did approve the task force, and they're going to come back with a recommendation. And I like the idea of the task force because it's our professionals with the professional background and experience that are looking at this, our provosts and our presidents and our deans and their respective staff. So so that what Grant's saying is then they're going to present us with their conclusions and we're going to vote on it probably. Is that correct?
Well, that's what we're discussing, because they have presented those conclusions to us in June, I think. So we've had the recommendations, and that's what's actually up here on the board now. But my view is that we have the recommendation. What the chancellor is saying is that if we approve the strategic plan right now. We are adopting the task force recommendation. And my only argument is that I just think there needs to be a middle component, and that's, I have to say, hey, Don, what do you think about a 22? Or Terry, what do you think about the people who fall outside? And we haven't done that.
Yeah, and we got a half hour left. Can't we have that discussion?
I would say you're having it right now.
Right.
But is there anything that says we have half an hour left?
Yeah, that's.
I mean, this is a critical discussion, and I just want to point out something that, when you look at the Noel Levitt's report, the institutions surveyed, none of them had a sliding scale based upon ACT score and GPA. And I'm very uncomfortable with the GPA component, because we know GPA can be widely variable depending upon the size of the institution, where the institution is located, the quality.
About high school institution?
Yeah. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. Admission standards based upon high school GPA, which is a highly variable number. What's Red River versus Fargo South versus Velva? I don't know. But the problem is, when we approach this at the graduate level and we're looking at GPAs for students coming in, we're always looking at the GRE as that normalization factor, right? Because I've seen quality of institutions, I've had students with 4.0s that drop out, okay? But they also happen to have low GRE scores. And so I think it's important to know that GPA is that sliding scale that is not fixed. It is highly variable. And the only number that you can actually hang your hat on is the ACT, because that's a test that every child is taking across the nation with regards to either that or the SAT with regards to admission.
Dr. Murphy, I would like to address the idea that we only have a half an hour left, and that is not the case. We will forego the training this afternoon if need be, because I do think this is very important. So
thank you, Madam Chair.
Keep that in mind. But now, as far as we do have somewhat of a sliding scale here, correct? Or did we lose that as far as if they had an ACT of something and a GPA of something else, that things moved around a little bit?
Right, and that's what's showing right now on the dashboard. But Dr. Reeser is here. I saw her earlier. If she could come up and talk to some of these issues. The reality is that GPA, and I agree with you, there's a lot of variable on GPA, but the reality is all the studies say that the best indicator of success of a student in college is not the ACT, it's the GPA. And but Dr. Reeser can...
Madam Chair, though, before we get into this, just a question about the strategic plan, and maybe to Connie and the Chancellor. If you read, for instance, 3.1A right now, it says key indicator new admission standards for incoming high school freshmen fall 2016, outcome full implementation by fall 2018. Earlier on, we had a 15% number that was just used just to have it there. And with, for instance, remedial ed, we're not prepared to lock ourselves in on remedial ed because we still have the K-20. And so I'm just wondering, why is it absolutely necessary on this component to have this locked in today, where we have other parts of this document that we're still wrapping up? I'm not saying we should continue a discussion on admission standards into 2015-16, but I'm just wondering why it is this component. If we pass the document as it reads, I don't see where it says we're adopting the task force, which tells me we still have the ability as a board to find out where we're going to be at. And my view is that I'd rather at least pass this out with the understanding that, all right, we are going to have a period of time as a board where we can have a very robust discussion with the time we need and not putting a square peg through a round hole. And that seems to be what I, for instance, have commitments this afternoon because I wasn't going to be here for an orientation starting at noon. And so this really isn't the way backing into admission standards, and I think maybe we need to get a feel for how the board thinks about that.
Let me start in response to your statement, Ms. Chapp. The board is always at liberty to do what it wants to do. This is a governing board. So what we're seeking today is an approval of a strategic plan that is a living, breathing document that the board and, we can put every one of these goals on future board meetings and revisit every one of them as we move forward, but at least we've got a plan in place that we're working on. But you can always at any time say, on 2.2, and I'm just making this up, on 2.2, we don't think that we're using the right key indicator on there, let's change it to X. Now, obviously, we don't want to be jarring ourselves all over the place, but on these really important discussions, I think that it is important that the board has the prerogative at any time to revisit one of these. But we have got to get something in place for a number of reasons. One of them is we've got to get it to the Higher Learning Commission to say that we have a strategic plan in place. Number two is we've got to let K-12 people know what are the admission standards right now. And if we can have that discussion down the road, and as we move forward, as that train moves forward, because we've got students in K-12 now that are moving towards graduation, they need to know as freshmen in high school what's going to be the gateway when they graduate as seniors. That's a continuing thing. We can't stop that. That's continuing, moving on. We've got to be able to tell them something. As we have discussions in the future, then absolutely you can say, we're going to change this to X, and it will be effective at this particular date out in the future, because that train's continuing to run. Those students starting in their freshman year in high school are getting ready to go to university, and so they've got to know what the gateway is when they get there. But the board is a governing board. The board can have these discussions at any time and can make modifications to it, of course.
Just recently, I read an article, I think it was in the paper, about how the student enrollment at UND had been decreasing this year, and the reason for that was because of the admission standard changes. And I was curious to know what the admission standards are at UND versus NDSU, and what effects the research universities feel that if we adopt this program, that would help or hurt their enrollment. From some of the other articles I read, as we increase the admission standards, it could affect enrollment somewhat. But I think at the end of the day, it does give us a much more qualified student and much more opportunity for student success. So, I'm sorry?
Yep.
And so, anyway, I'd be interested in knowing from Dr. Kelly or Dr. Prashani, if they, or anybody else, if they feel that this standard over the long term is going to affect their programs.
Dr. Melker, I think that is something that we will do. I think at this point in time, we need to address Mr. Schaaf's question on, can we adopt this and then adjust later so that we can move on and get this passed today. I think if we have a in-depth discussion on each institution and where they're going, how this is going to affect them, I think that's been done already when they were in their task forces. They were working on that. However, I'd like to move forward. So let's brainstorm how we can move forward and satisfy the board with this portion of the strategic plan.
Madam Chair, my view is to say we passed 3.1A and et cetera, as indicated here, with the understanding as a board, just like we're doing with remedial ed and just like we're doing with 15%, we're saying that we are not adopting the task force recommendation at this time. It doesn't mean we're not going to. It just means we're not at this time. I have a hard time believing the Higher Learning Commission is going to say, we're not going to accreditate you because you wanted to take an extra 30 days to make sure you got your admission standards right.
Correct. Okay. Sure. Ms. Reichert?
Well, I don't mean to throw another wrench in there, but I feel like some of the metrics that Dr. De Lorenzo was talking about this morning could change things as well. I mean, if we have better data on what's actually predictive of success, I mean, should we be open to revisiting this at any time?
Right.
Well, and I think that's something that the Higher Learning Commission report was addressing, is that we need to revisit this more often than we have in the past. And so we will be doing that, Carrie, and I think that's a very good idea. All right, so, yes.
This was a parliamentary question. So if we made a motion to adopt the strategic plan, but then to leave it open to adjustment, starting with the Valley City meeting later this month, would that be appropriate?
Well, let's discuss that. I'm concerned about if we would be stalling momentum for our institutions on doing their initiatives. However, we could, Mr. Chancellor?
I'd like Lori to respond to the
Okay.
timing issue relative to this.
I think Connie and I were just talking about a kind of a housekeeping. This 2-page document with all those standards is an appendix in the plan.
Okay.
So I think logistically,
we don't
whatever you would
have
approve, you would
that
want to
here, okay.
remove that from, I mean, the assumption I think we were making is if it was in the appendix, then it was part of the plan, and if you approved it, then these standards were approved. So I think that's a clarification that you would need to make. We have, these proposals were not going to go into effect until the students for fall of 2016. So those are current juniors, and so we have a little bit of time, but we're recruiting juniors right now. We're recruiting juniors and seniors in high school. So again, it goes to the sooner we can resolve these issues and make clarification on what our admission standards are. And I absolutely agree with the Chancellor, this is a 3 to 4 year plan out. It helps our students prepare and know so that they don't wake up their senior year and go, wow, they changed the standards. I can't go back to my freshman year in high school and redo my grades or take different courses. So that's the intentionality, was to partner with K-12 more effectively and give those students as much time. A few weeks here and there, the next meeting, I think we would be okay, but the longer we don't have these questions answered, the harder it is to recruit and to be clear, to increase quality, to increase enrollment. If we don't have those answers, then it's very difficult to recruit students.
Okay.
Well, and going to Mr. McEwen's question, just from what the Chancellor and the President are trying to do with Higher Learning Commission, it seems to me that they would be better postured if we came out of here today approving the strategic plan, but with a caveat that we weren't adopting that appendix yet, and even if we do put it on our agenda at the end of the month, I think that's fine. I want to be clear that my view of that isn't that we're going to blow the whole task force recommendation up. I mean, that's not my view. My view is it's an important enough thing that I really want all board members to know that this is what they're going to be doing at this particular meeting. They're all prepared for it, and we get our questions out. Because I don't know if we all fully understood that's what we were doing here today. So I would move at this point in time, well, I'll wait till we go through full adoption and I'll.
Okay, and so I do have a request. I think we're starting to ask questions that are digging pretty deep into the strategic plan that maybe it's good to do that, but I think I'd like you to kind of keep it, is this a good idea? Is this the direction we want to go? Is it not the direction we want to go? Not get down to the details of everything from here on out. But of course, you are free to ask at any time if it's a very major concern of yours. But, because a lot of this stuff that's in here, and the reason they proposed these goals is because we've had the data for a long time saying that we have issues with these goals, and so we should know this stuff. Okay, Connie?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Certainly, the expectation of anyone who has worked with this plan is that, again, what we said earlier, the board has to have a continuing conversation, and this may be the first thing on your list. The campuses will be working on the initiatives, and the staff will be figuring out how to support both efforts. So I think you have the first item on the board list. If we can look at 3.2, this is increase overall attainment rates. Here we looked at participation and retention and completion, and Lisa is going to show you a quick demo of A and B and C key indicators. We do not have the student achievement measures, so we will focus on A, B, and C.
We have a few student achievement measures. Okay, so 3.2A is the iPads retention rate, and that's a drill down, so I'll show you that in a second. 3.2B and C are iPads graduation rates, and that's also a drill down. And then the SAM, the team was able to get the SAM graduation rates in yesterday, and that is just for the institutions that were members of SAM this year, and then next year we'll have all of the institutions in there.
By way of explanation, your iPads rates are first-time, full-time students at the same institution, period. Your SAM rates include transfer students. So a student that starts at Bismarck State and then completes at NDSU is included in the SAM graduation rates, but that student would not be included in the iPads graduation rates.
So, Mr. Chancellor, do we need to then, will there be some, for lack of a better way of putting it, permanent components that will now go into the president's goals? Because you take graduation rates, so you're going to say to Bob, one of your goals is, what are you going to do for graduation rates over the next year?
Right.
This is what I'm going to do. And then it gets reported back up. Is that how that works?
Well, how it works is when we establish the goals, and I bring those forward to the board, and I will have conversations with the presidents, there's 20 indicators?
29.
29. So there's 29 key indicators. Graduation rates here is just one.
Right.
And, that's a discussion the board has to have is, out of these 29, what are the ones most important relative
Right.
to the performance of a president?
Those would go out, and then you'd get the plan back from the
Right.
president. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll go to retention rates first.
Any comments about retention rates?
And this is freshman and sophomore?
This is first time, full time.
Yes.
Your colleges are doing a better job than they used to.
Okay.
We ready for B?
Whoops. Okay, now this is iPads 100%. So that would be 4 years at a 4-year and 2 years at a 2-year. And then I can click this and go to the 150%, and that will change to the iPads 150%.
Questions on that?
And then the SAM, and as I said, that one's new as of yesterday, so.
So perhaps next year we can show you the full complement of institutions measured against the SAM. 3.2E is degrees and certificates awarded to Pell Grant recipients. And Lisa, I don't know if are we going to demo that one?
Let's see here.
Maybe we can go to the degree and licensure button.
Maybe it's there.
Oh, here we go. Here's Pell Grant on the left. And the first time pass rates on the professional exams measured against national.
And the Pell Grant is, we can drill down by institution. And this one, we can also do historical, but we didn't have time to get that in there. So this is just this 2013, I believe.
And then if we can toggle back to the PowerPoint, unless there are questions about those, we will go on to 3.3, which is removing barriers to advising transfer, registering and advising transfer students. And we do not have a button to show you on that. So unless there are questions, we will move on to 4.0. Sorry, Dr. Murphy.
Well, I get this little thing. I have an overall question, and as you know, I'm very concerned about using the word ensure student success. Ensure, although it may not hold up in court as a contractual agreement, certainly this has been challenged nationwide at other institutions that have chosen to use this word. And I think it's important to understand that it's impossible for me to ensure success of any student in my class. I cannot take the exam for them. I can't write their papers they have to write. I can't make them read the reading assignments. You know, the student, that is actually up for the student to do. Okay, we can promote that. We can provide an environment that enhances success, but certainly we can't ensure it. It's impossible. And so what you're asking is it's no different than we can ensure that every student will never touch a drop of alcohol when they go to college, or will never do a prank. I mean, it's impossible for higher education to do that. And so I actually think you're not only putting faculty into a position, but you're putting the presidents and the institutions into a position by using a word. Words have meaning. And word ensure has a very, very important meaning that differentiates it from other words that could be used. And so my concern is the use of that word ensure. None of this other part do I have a major concern about. We can discuss the admissions policies, as we already said, later, but that's really a key thing. And I think people should consider that, the board should consider that point. Thank you.
Just, Dr. Murphy, just curious, what would we say for goal 3? What does the board want to say there rather than ensure student success? Because I think we're all in agreement that student success is what this is about.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think what we're really talking about is we want to provide an environment that leverages the ability of students to succeed. Here's your tools you have. And what we want to do is provide the environment, whether it's enhanced advising, whether it's a great wellness center, whether it's additional activities, whether it's experiential learning activities, so forth, to leverage their ability to succeed. We want to give them those tools, okay? And we want to provide those. And we want to enhance what we're doing. What we're doing well, we want to do better. What we're not doing so well, we want to determine that so we can do better. So I think, I would agree, I think everybody's on the page. My point is the word ensure in a public document suggests something that we can't provide, right? And so I would rather go back to what are we really doing? We want to provide an environment where students have the opportunity for success. That's what we're doing. And so how we want to phrase that, my only point is the word ensure is a bit of a problem. Others may not feel that it is.
The word that would better define probably what he's saying is secure. Secure is different. I mean, if you're reading it at face value, we would think of it as the same thing, but secure has a different connotation. It means you're taking actions that will protect against them failing. That's what secure is. I don't feel as strongly as Dr. Murphy about it, but I'm just throwing that out as
As I recall, Mr. Shaft, you were the one that defended Ensure on that day.
That's why
I have heard you all say, some of my friends are for it, some are against it.
Whoever comes up with the best retainer.
Ensure, promote, leverage, enhance, and secure are the 5 words that I've heard this morning.
How about nurture? Is that too touchy-feely? Nurture.
Ensure, promote, leverage, enhance, secure, or nurture.
What else do
Anyone feel strongly? Or here's another language substitution. Written on the finest stationery the School of Science offers. Equip students to
Not me this time, thank you.
What was that one, Connie?
Equip students to succeed. Equip. Equip students to succeed.
I think equipping students is probably better than the other alternatives, because that's what we're actually trying to do.
That's not too industrial for you.
No. No, even philosophers have to be equipped.
How does that feel? Equip students to succeed. For success. Equip students for success is another version.
And I think that word also brings into the lifelong learning component of what we're working on, and critical thinking and enhancing those skills. So I think equip is an excellent word, and I highly support that word.
Equip students for success, going once, going twice. Do you like it? Thumbs up?
Secure too, but you've got secure going here. And
All right.
have equip.
I'm not on the board. You have secure student success or equip
Yes.
students for success.
Well, we better be careful and see what the...
Could we be as basic as a show of hands for the different terms? How many people are in favor of secure? Five? Okay, how about equip?
Well, now, am I raising my hand on this or not?
This is not our
Three.
official vote.
Okay. Just clarifying.
All right, so some people, it's not that big of a deal. We have a tie. Then I get to be the tiebreaker. Of course, I voted the first time.
Then you don't have a
I
tie.
know. Okay. You know, we'll leave it to you. You decide what you think.
Thanks. I hope that's the hardest thing I have to do today.
That's not, you know, you just,
We got to give you one.
you can ask around and see, but I think it sounds as though we don't really care if it's one or the other.
All right.
Okay.
We will certainly remove the word ensure. Dr. Murphy's comments reminded me of the lobbyist who told a panel of legislators, I can explain it to you, but I can't understand it for you. Then if we are ready, I think we were talking about 3.3A, removing barriers to registering and advising transfer students. Any comments on that? Then we'll move to 4.0, which is the strengths of the unified system. And you have 4 strategies, including academic collaboration, greater efficiencies through shared programs and services, the ability to respond quickly to changing needs, and enhancing the research reputations of the research institutions. And so your key indicator under 4.1 is, the measurement is the number of collaborative students. And to Ms. Reichert's question, there we're benchmarking against the previous year and saying annual improvement. On that one at least. 4.2, we're looking at programs and services delivered collaboratively, and again, benchmarking annually. 4.3 is streamlined policies and procedures. For the benefit of the conversation with the presidents, I characterized the NDUS policies and procedures as a Byzantine plot. But I will tell you, that was just facetiously. I will say that I've heard in a number of settings how hard people are working on that already and taking it very seriously. Then under 4.4, the 2 research institution presidents offered their thoughts on these 4 metrics. At one point we had 7. These are the 4 that we are offering for your conversation. So it's research and development expenditures in science and engineering, and then in non-science and engineering, the staff in science and engineering and other non-faculty research, staff with doctorates, and then the doctoral conferrals in the humanities, social science, STEM, and other fields. And again, with those 4 indicators, we are looking for annual improvements. So the benchmark is simply year by year. Comments on that? Questions on that? Then,
If I can, just a minute, an update on the leveraging or creating efficiencies through shared programs. Just to let you know that President Brashani has agreed to lead a task force that is right now looking at payroll across the system. The Affordable Care Act has created many challenges for us, and one of those challenges is that we have required reporting on the number of hours that people work for the university system and whether or not they're receiving insurance and so on and so forth. It's all very complex. And one of the issues then that came out of those discussions is the fact of trying to figure out if it makes sense to share such a service as payroll. And I know Mr. Morton would say, hey, I do all of Microsoft payroll. It makes sense to me. And so, but President Brashani agreed to lead that group. I think they've met once or maybe twice. And then we will expand that into further discussions about other possibilities for shared services.
thank you. The back part of your report I characterized as important themes running through many, many conversations, but we had a bit of we were handicapped in providing you measurable outcomes. But because those were identified not just on July 31st in your conversation, but really are themes running throughout the massive amount of input, those nearly 2,000 people that somehow touched the input phase of our strategic planning process. These are items you may want to put the question of the academic standards at the top of this list and talk about any of these. This may be the board's list for further discussion. It may be fodder for the institutions as they develop the campus initiatives and offer those plans to you. So there's this is an interesting list, and again, we didn't put objectives and measurements in there on these, but they are important topics.
Quick question. I just found out yesterday, Microsoft, there's an executive order in any company that has federal contracts, 7% of our new hires each year have to be veterans. Is higher ed going to be impacted by that too? Is the public sector?
Sir, that's the first time I've heard it. I have no idea. Something we ought to have our legal counsel check into.
When I saw the word veterans, it reminded me.
Yeah.
After 20 years, the whole company could be veterans.
Oh.
It doesn't say your existing. 7% of your existing says 7% of your new hires every year.
I wonder where that percentage came from.
White House.
Real pixie dust.
Pixie dust.
So Connie, then the pending attachments, those are tied to some of these areas that we haven't been able to measure yet. We have a little bit of a difference in what's on our computer agenda, and maybe I'm one behind, but there's a pending 4.4.
No, 4.4.
Or
I'm sorry, I'm
I'm looking at like these on the attachments.
Oh, I see what you mean.
And those are areas where we still need to find a way to come up with a...
This is the list of attachments that were in your packet, your electronic packet. The links where you see pending, that means unless the board decides this is the plan, and then we need to go out and get the information. So we've been showing you what we have available, what we've been able to construct, knowing that you may delete something or add something else. So these formulated the buttons that Lisa demonstrated, this information. But there are a number of places where we simply don't have the data.
Is it appropriate to move for the adoption of the strategic plan, Madam Chairman?
I'm sorry.
Oh.
Thanks a lot.
Is it appropriate to approve the adoption of the strategic plan at this time? And the acceptance?
Let me just add something. I think Grant raises a good point. I'm biased towards accepting the task force because of their expertise, their experience, their background. So I'm biased to accept it. But I think we also, I have an obligation as a board member to better understand their thinking and how they arrived at these numbers. And so can we pass the strategic plan with the idea that we will have this discussion with the board sometime?
Well, that would be, I don't want to step on your toes, but my motion, if made, would say that we pass the strategic plan with two notations. One, that we clearly state that we're implementing, that Pathways initiative is going to be now fully implemented in the strategic plan, so that we at least have cleared the deck on that, so we know where Pathways is. This isn't the form of my motion yet, but what I want to get at, and that we continue to peg within the strategic plan where Pathways is, so that we can find those references, and Connie has done that already in what we see. That would be one component. The second would be that we pass the plan without adopting the admissions task force's report at this time, but I think the board chair would know that outside of the motion, we're intending to address it as soon as possible. And then the only other question I had is, do we have to have any language, for instance, with the 15%? Because it's on here. So, I mean, should we be addressing that or not?
Mr. Schaff, perhaps the motion is to note the continuing discussion on admission standards and the language changes that were recommended by the board. So we would remove the 15%. So we would just say increased faculty use. And the other place where we would make a correction was in one of those later 3.2 something. It's the full-time first-time freshman for the admission standards. And those are the only two language changes I heard, but I could be wrong.
That's Dr. Murphy.
Ensure.
And then
Ensure was
I'm sorry, with the rewording of.
So in that event, I would move that the board adopt the strategic plan that is before us with the following caveats. One, that Connie be able to incorporate the language and numerical changes that were discussed by the board, that the Pathways initiative upon passage of the strategic plan will be fully implemented now within the strategic plan, but will be, this is a word, referenceable within the documents, so we can find where that initiative lives, so to speak, and that we are not adopting the admissions task force recommendation at this time, but we'll discuss that recommendation and approve an admission standards at that time.
Okay, so we do
Very inartful what I just said, but
Christie's got it down.
yeah.
So we do have a motion, and we'll have time to discuss this after. Second that. Some discussion. I'd like to know a little bit more about, when you say Pathways is fully implemented, what does that mean? I mean, we have incorporated quite a bit of Pathways into here, but there might be some portions of that did not make it into here, for instance,
Well,
mediation, which.
that's, I was kind of
yeah.
relying on what the chancellor said, that
Yeah.
he felt comfortable that everything would pretty much fit in here.
Well, but there are exceptions.
Okay.
And in our exchange yesterday, for example, the remediation is not in there. It's addressed in here in the new strategic plan, but it's not what Pathways suggested.
Right.
Number two, the tuition models and Pathways can't be implemented.
Right.
And so to say just in blanket that we're implementing all this, so everything that was in Pathways that we have identified in the strategic plan, if the strategic plan is approved, they are implemented. So for example, the mandatory fees, that's implemented in here. And an admissions index that's approved by the board, which hasn't been done before. But
And
to the
I think
point
what
that
I'm getting at is that my motion says that the strategic plan will now be the vehicle for implementing Pathways. I'm not trying to cement us into, because obviously we talked about the admissions index has changed already.
Right.
But that we're not going to have these two parallel vehicles.
that I
It'll
agree
be-
with.
Yeah, it'll be
And
implemented through.
I think we had some wording that legal counsel had recommended that I think includes
Yes.
exactly what Mr. Shaft is
And
getting at.
I can share that right now and see if it is
Sure.
acceptable to you. Otherwise, a recommendation came forth that perhaps we should take a recess, have lunch, and then have a typed version of your motion so that we can actually look at it and see what we're saying, even though you did a beautiful job.
Wasn't
Fran.
that
All right, but here is the motion recommended by legal counsel. I move to approve this strategic plan, that it shall supersede and replace existing strategic plans and the Pathways to Student Success Plan, components of which have been incorporated into this plan. That the effective date of this plan, boy, there's a lot of plan in there, of this plan shall be October 3rd, 2014, and that the State Board of Higher Education shall annually evaluate implementation progress and appropriate updates to the plan.
Is that from Murray?
Mhm.
Okay, I'll chat with you just a little bit. I think that's pretty good, Diane.
Okay, so we're getting a little closer.
Yep.
Okay, so, yes.
Madam Chair, just one more piece before you eat, and you might consider this dessert, but we believe that the university system has such a marvelous story to tell, and one of the pieces that has come through everything is that we need a way to tell that story. And so Director Donlin has been working very hard on a publication that, of course, can be modified. This is just a draft, but perhaps you'll consider this dessert while you're having lunch.
Okay, thank you.
And I think as we've discussed in past, we need to tell our story more and better than we have in the past. And also part of a strategic plan is engaging our audiences in it. So what we're proposing in this communication piece, which is basically, it has the parts of the plan that you just discussed, plus all the good stories about what is now going on in the system, plus some easily understandable financials that will be a tool for you as we go forward in the next year. It should have good shelf life and will be a good handout for you to tell a story. We also have some, we'll do one-piece handouts. We'll have some pocket-sized things for our internal audiences to use. But this is just a draft. You know, we got campuses gave us their photos of their signature programs, and we want to explain what we are doing and get people engaged in the strategies. All the people who gave input to Connie, and we'll give them reports then not only with the dashboards, but also this type of communication going forward.
Kirsten, can you read that motion again, please?
Motion to approve this strategic plan, that it shall supersede and replace existing strategic plans and the Pathways to Student Success Plan, components of which have been incorporated into this plan. That the effective date of the plan shall be October 3rd, 2014, and that the board shall annually evaluate implementation, progress, and appropriate updates to the plan.
Okay. So basically, we're accepting the plan as is with the review yearly or annually, correct?
And as the chancellor has said, we're the board, we can make changes as we see fit.
Okay.
Do it weekly if you want to.
Weekly.
No.
Yes, Kathleen.
Are we saying that this supersedes pathways? Because I think we have to remember, we already approved pathways.
And so what we've done is I think we've incorporated it into.
We're incorporated,
this.
because you have some wording in there that says it supersedes.
Supersedes it and other strategic plans, because I think there was concern that we were going to be in a position where we had two running again, and the Higher Learning Commission is saying, where's your plan, which one is it, and what are you doing?
Right.
So for confusion, which is why we're going to make sure that in this plan, we give credit to pathways throughout. This was a pathways initiative, this was a pathways initiative, so that it's still here and with us.
Okay. 'Cause I also feel that we're doing double time here. We do have competing, it almost seems like we're duplicating some things. So if we can get beyond that, I think it would be more constructive.
I agree with you, and I think this could be the answer to that.
Could we refer to it as Pathways 2.0?
Then we don't need Ensure.
Well, actually, if you look at the communication piece, we took some of the consideration, and we're talking about building the North Dakota University System Edge. So it's daring to be great, building the edge for our students going forward in the future. So, you know, as the communication builds on year over year, we hope to create that and have today's strategic plan develop its own identity.
Okay, great discussion, everybody. We have some work to do when we get back, but I think we'll be ready to do so, and we will adjourn for some lunch. At what time do we start? Yes.
Logistics on lunch, because of your schedule, if we can allow the board members to exit and grab lunch out here first, and then the residents and campus representatives second, and then the others are more than welcome. That way you can get back to your work, because it is a working lunch.
It is, okay, great.